Who, indeed, is this person? Yang Dingyuan sat on the narrow bunk of a military transport train, having just inscribed the final word of today's entry in his diary, when suddenly a chill coursed through him. This carriage was cramped, accommodating 50 bunk beds, and apart from a narrow aisle, there was scarcely room to stand. Here, amidst the newly recruited laborers from various locales, all strangers to one another, Yang's bunk nestled in the farthest corner went unnoticed. Yet, an unsettling sensation enveloped him as he felt a piercing gaze directed towards him from the crowd. He lifted his head, eager to discern the source of this scrutiny, but all he could see was a dense sea of unfamiliar faces, none revealing any sign of recognition. Had someone already taken offense against him upon his departure from Harbin? With a sense of bewilderment, Yang set aside his diary and ink, reclining on his bunk and gazing vacantly at the ceiling. Yang Dingyuan, hailing from Rongcheng, Shandong, was born in 1894 and had just turned 21. Though still a youth, there was an air of maturity in his gaze that belied his years. His family belonged to the ranks of ordinary farmers, and as his father had never learned to read, he resolved that Yang would receive an education. However, after a few years of attending a private school, financial hardship forced him to abandon his studies and seek employment. Despite toiling in menial labor, he clung to the habit of journaling, carrying his diary with him wherever he went. The train emitted a strained, prolonged whistle, laboring its way out of Harbin Station. Ahead lay an expanse of dense forest, resembling an unfathomable abyss, swallowing everything in its path without a trace. This was a service train of the Chinese Eastern Railway, originally known as the Dongqing Railway, constructed under duress from Russia following the First Sino-Japanese War, as a result of the secret Sino-Russian agreement. This railway stretched from Chita in the west to Swifen in the east, with a branch line from Harbin directly to Dalian, linking Siberia and northeast China. Through this railway, Russians continuously flocked to the far east, gradually encroaching upon the pristine landscapes of northeast China, while a multitude of Chinese, driven by the need for survival, ventured far from their homes into the Siberian wilderness. The carriage was crowded, but the cold weather spared them from the stench of sweat, though it remained stiflingly oppressive. Yang rested his head upon his bundle, lost in thought. Zhenzhong must be on his way home now. He wondered how he would greet his parents. The lofty aspirations he had when departing had dissipated, leaving him with a singular resolve: to survive. To rise against the odds and venture eastward was a phrase often uttered by Shandong folk. In these times, however, there were no heroes left at Liangshan to turn to for those like him. It seemed that the only recourse was to brave the eastward journey. But the East was fraught with its own challenges, a realization Zhenzhong must have come to by now. Yang thought to himself, unable to suppress a bitter smile. Yang Dingyuan initially apprenticed at a sock factory in Weihai, garnering the admiration of his fellow villagers in Rongcheng for his promising prospects. Upon mastering his craft, he was summoned by boss Zhou, the owner of the factory, to serve as a skilled worker at a newly established branch in Harbin, which had opened to accommodate a growing workforce. Among his acquaintances back home was Chun Jinzhong, who, upon learning of Yang's impending journey to Harbin, was inspired by tales of Shandong men prospering in the northeast, and insisted on accompanying him. Two other men from Shandong, both hailing from Shozhong, joined their ranks, and the quartet arrived in Harbin, initially exhilarated by the city's burgeoning vitality. However, within a few months, their spirits were dampened by disillusionment. The branch's proprietor, a relative of boss Zhou, harbored disdain for Shandong natives. While boss Zhou was stern with his employees, this branch owner was even more unyielding. After a year of labor, Yang Dingyuan found himself not only devoid of earnings, but also in debt to the factory. In frustration, he contemplated returning home alongside Zhenzhong. Yet, with no money to his name, Yang felt cornered. His gaze fell upon a recruitment office seeking laborers for Russia. At that time, the Beiyang government had aligned itself with the Allies in World War I, which mandated China to supply laborers to the Allied nations. The Fuya Company in Harbin was tasked with this endeavor, offering $10 upon registration. Resolute, Yang registered and handed over the entire sum to Chun Zhenzhong for his return home. From that moment on, he would be leaving his homeland, uncertain of when he might return. Thoughts of his parents' graying hair stirred a pang of sorrow within him. The western terminus of the Middle East road was Chita, yet their journey would lead them further west, into the unknown. Lost in contemplation, a boisterous voice suddenly broke through, exclaiming, "Come on, sitting idly won't do, let's roll the dice and test our luck. Once you buy in, there's no backing out." The speaker, with a pronounced Anhui accent, filled the cramped carriage with his resonant tone. The train was filled with laborers, each with a modest sum of money, often resorting to two pastimes: gambling or seeking companionship. While there was no opportunity for the latter on the train, gambling was ever present. The Anhui man rattled a handful of dice in a bowl, creating a cacophony that drew several passengers to his side, encircling him and filling the air with shouts and banter. Yang Dingyuan had never engaged in gambling, but he recalled his father's admonitions from his youth, warning that gambling could lead to ruin and that it was better to live with integrity. Yet, the raucous sounds of betting pierced his ears, preventing him from finding rest. He turned over in his bunk, hoping to escape the noise, when a sharp voice interrupted him. "Brother, could you please move aside?" He sat up to see a young boy holding a basin of water before him. Momentarily taken aback, he heard a curse from the upper bunk. "You little rascal, it took you this long to bring water." Before he could finish his words, darkness enveloped him as a figure leapt down from the upper bunk. Though this individual was not taller than Yang Dingyuan, his descent was accompanied by only a faint sound. Yang Dingyuan was taken aback, contemplating, this person appears to be quite skilled. The newcomer, not particularly tall, landed with a flourish and brazenly addressed Yang Dingyuan, saying, "Brother, kindly make way, I need to wash my feet." All the occupants of this train carriage were impoverished men heading to Russia for labor, leaving Yang Dingyuan perplexed about the stranger's origins. His attire was rather commonplace, yet notably tidy, especially with a sleek, oiled braid trailing from the back of his head. In the 4th year of the Republic, most people had long since abandoned their braids, but this man cherished his as a prized possession, adorning the end with a pale blue satin. Bow. This appearance reminded Yang Dingyuan of his childhood, a sight now rare in recent years. He shifted aside, and the man, seeing Yang Dingyuan's compliance, flashed a broad smile and said, "Thank you, brother." He then turned to the youth, adopting a stern demeanor, and commanded, "You little rascal, bring it over here." The young boy placed a copper basin beneath the bunk, and the man unwrapped his foot wrappings, plunging his feet into the water, grinning as he remarked, "Ah, how refreshing." Outside, the world was a frozen wasteland, although the carriage was not particularly cold due to the crowd. Soaking one's feet in cold water could hardly be considered pleasant. Yet, the man seemed to relish the experience, vigorously scrubbing his feet in the basin. His feet, in fact, were cleaner than most, yet he insisted on washing them meticulously, seemingly intent on cleaning even the spaces between his toes. As he washed, he addressed Yang Dingyuan, saying, "Brother, I apologize for my behavior. I simply cannot sleep soundly without washing my feet first. By the way, my surname is Hua Jingqi. May I ask for your esteemed name?" Though Hua Jingqi was somewhat oblivious to his surroundings, his speech was nonetheless courteous. Yang Dingyuan replied, "I am Yang, Master Hua." Upon being addressed as Master, Hua Jingqi appeared even more pleased, grinning broadly as he said, "Ah, so you are Master Yang. May I inquire about your full name?" Hua Jingqi's language was rather flowery. Leaving Yang Dingyuan feeling somewhat restrained, he clasped his hands together in a gesture of respect and replied, "My humble name is Dingyuan." Hua Jingqi paused, smacking his lips in admiration. "Oh, a name of great prestige. Ban Dingyuan indeed." Yang Dingyuan offered a wry smile. "You jest." He amused to himself that Hua Jingqi must have read a few books. His name had been bestowed by his father's tutor, Mr. Hu, who remarked that his eyes resembled bright stars, foretelling great ambitions, and that one day he would rise to prominence in foreign lands, hence the chosen name. His father, of course, was unaware of the historical Ban Dingyuan. Yang Dingyuan had since acquired some education and was somewhat familiar with Ban Chaos Tale. Like Ban Dingyuan, he had left his studies to pursue a military career after a few years beyond that. The similarities were tenuous at best. Meanwhile, as Hua Jingqi continued to wash his feet, perhaps accustomed to the cold water, he squinted his eyes, genuinely appearing to enjoy the moment, still chattering away. Ban Dingyuan was one of the 28 generals of the Cloud Platform, right? In the days of Han Guangwu, vanquishing foes in the east and west, Ma Wu and Xin Peng were indeed formidable warriors. "I say, little rascal, do dispose of the dirty water." After drying his feet with the wrapping, Hua Jingqi, wary of soiling the ground, retrieved a pair of straw sandals from beneath the bunk with his feet. In the northeast, there are 3 treasures: ginseng, deer antler, and an herb known as wu la grass. Although wu la grass does not possess the same monetary value as ginseng or deer antler, the shoes made from it are said to keep one's feet warm even in the harshest of winters. In the northeast, these shoes are considered an essential item, thus earning their place as a treasure. As Hua Jingqi stepped onto his shoes, he clasped his hands in a gesture of respect towards Yang Dingyuan, saying, "Brother, pardon my intrusion. Until we meet again." With that, he placed a hand on the edge of the bed and leapt up to the upper bunk. The young man, however, dutifully took the basin of foot-washing water and stepped out into the aisle to dispose of it before settling down on the bunk beside Yang Dingyuan. Who, indeed, are these two individuals? Yang Dingyuan pondered. Hua Jingqi, occupying the upper bunk, clearly indicated he was not the owner of the gaze that had stirred unease within him. This enigmatic figure was observing him. Was it merely his imagination, or was there a hidden agenda? The more he contemplated, the more troubled he became. The dim light of a single oil lamp swayed with the motion of the train, casting flickering shadows that danced before his eyes. The sounds of gambling from the adjacent compartment erupted intermittently, blending into the rhythmic clatter of the train, gradually fading into the depths of his growing drowsiness. He fell into a deep slumber and experienced an elongated dream. In this dream, he returned to his hometown in Rongcheng. Yet all he could see were the graves of his parents. The old family home lay in ruins. When he inquired with a neighbor, he was met with blank stares, as the neighbor did not recognize him. "I am Yang Dingyuan," he declared. Yet those who had watched him grow insisted, "Yang Dingyuan has long since passed away." His parents awaited their son's return until their eyes wept blind. "You cannot be Yang Dingyuan." In his dream, desperation surged within him, and he cried out, "If I am not Yang Dingyuan, then who am I?" No matter his protestations, the others remained unconvinced of his identity. Someone handed him a mirror, saying, "If you claim to be Yang Dingyuan, look and see for yourself." He took the mirror and gazed into it, confronting a face marked by the trials of life. Yet he felt no disconnect with the reflection staring back at him. Just then, a distant voice seemed to echo in his ears, singing, buried in dust and grime, "I am a hero, a fleeting dream in the spring of 20 years." Yang Dingyuan had never heard such a song, which jolted him into the realization that he was indeed dreaming. The rhythmic clattering of the train grew deafening once more, yet the song persisted, becoming ever clearer. All ambition to soar, yet fate has not aligned what purpose serves. This treasure blade? He opened his eyes to find a beam of sunlight streaming through the crack of the train door, illuminating his face. As he turned his head, he noticed Hua Jingqi standing in the aisle, one hand holding a sweat towel, while the other pointed at a man seated in the lower bunk opposite him. The song was emanating from Hua Jingqi's lips. How had he begun to sing? Yang Dingyuan was momentarily taken aback. That moment. Hua Jingqi reached the final note, placing a pronounced emphasis on the word use, a stark contrast to his usual sharp tone. As the last word fell, applause erupted from several onlookers, including the very man whom Hua Jingqi had been pointing at. Hua Jingqi, with a beaming countenance, basked in the applause of the onlookers. He dramatically flicked his sweat towel and dusted off his attire, adopting an imposing stance before performing a circular bow, exclaiming, "I am Hua Jingqi from Hejin Prefecture, and I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all for gracing us with your presence. Pray tell, have you heard of the second Hua of the 8 Extremes school?" The man across from him paused in confusion and retorted, "That cannot be right. Hui Yuanjia belongs to our Tianjin, renowned for his elusive arts, not the 8 Extremes." Indeed, the fellow spoke in a distinct Tianjin dialect. Yang Dingyuan had also heard of Hui Yuanjia, a skilled practitioner who ran an herbal medicine shop in Tianjin, but he was unfamiliar with the elusive arts or the 8 Extremes. Hua Jingqi, however, regarded him with disdain and replied, "Well, Hui Yuanjia may have some renown in Tianjin, but what place does he hold in Beijing? My master is a grand master of the 8 Extremes, surnamed Li, with the appellation Xuan. I am his foremost disciple. I have a junior brother, also surnamed Hua, known as Hua Dinga. Have you heard of him?" The Tianjin man shook his head. "I have not." "I say, you are but a frog in a well, lacking worldly experience, are you not? Our 8 Extremes boasts 6 great openings and 8 great techniques, with the 3 unconcerned at the door and fierce tiger climbing the mountain. Truly, brother, you seem untrained. We shan't take advantage of you. Were you knowledgeable, today would surely be an eye-opening experience," Hua Jingqi declared with increasing enthusiasm, draping the towel over his shoulder and assuming combat stance. That he continued, "In the realm of the 8 Extremes, this punch, though seemingly small in space, possesses the might of 1,000 pounds, guaranteed to shatter your skull and break your bones at as." He spoke fervently. Yang Dingyuan noticed the youth beside him, who had served Hua Jingqi the previous day, subtly curl his lips in disdain. Quietly, he inquired, "Is Master Hu your elder brother?" The youth turned to see Yang Dingyuan and replied softly, "I suppose so. What was your occupation before? Were you with a caravan?" The youth shook his head. "We serve in the palace." Yang Dingyuan was taken aback. The term Gongbong Gong Gong referred to the eunuchs of the former Qing dynasty. He had not anticipated that both Hu Jingqi and this youth were eunuchs themselves, and he found it difficult to comprehend why they, like him, sought a livelihood abroad. His curiosity piqued. He began to engage the youth in quiet conversation. Though the young man was not particularly loquacious, he gradually lowered his guard upon realizing Yang Dingyuan's amiable demeanor. It turned out that this youth also bore the surname Hua, with Hu Jingqi being a sword-bearing eunuch of the palace, while the young Hua served as his attendant. Following the fall of the Qing dynasty and the expulsion of the imperial family by Feng Yuxiang, these eunuchs were left with no recourse and scattered. Hu Jingqi, once of a respectable standing, had accumulated a modest fortune and, upon leaving the palace, opened a mutton restaurant, earning a considerable sum. He indulged in leisure, attending operas and parading around as a nobleman. However, one day, his pretentiousness led him to offend a warlord who sought his life. Despite losing his restaurant in the ensuing chaos, he could not resolve the matter and was forced to bring his companion to the northeast, where, to survive, he ended up in a labor camp. When Yang Dingyuan inquired why he did not seek refuge with his fellow disciples at the Badgerman, the young eunuch, Xiao Hua, merely scoffed, saying, "He hardly qualifies. As a member of the Badgerman, Master Li would never accept a eunuch. He has merely learned a few superficial tricks within the palace and is trying to cling on. Master Li has probably never even heard of him." Although his mood was far from cheerful, Yang Dingyuan could not suppress a smile. Humanity is nourished by the diverse grains of the earth, and indeed, Hu Jingqi is a peculiar individual. He glanced at the people around him behind the faces that appeared to be monotonously identical. There might be many with extraordinary past akin to Hu Jingqi's. Yet, what intentions lay behind the one who had been secretly watching him? Seemingly still craving the stage, Hu Jingqi rambled on before breaking into song once more. Now aware of his status as a eunuch, Yang Dingyuan found himself less curious about his shrill voice. Though his singing was not particularly melodious, it bore an unusual sense of desolation. With his eyes closed, the cramped compartment faded away, replaced by a vast expanse of open fields, where the wind howled fiercely. Upon finishing a verse, applause erupted from the audience, and someone called out, "Master Hua, what play is this? I've never heard it before." At that moment, Hu Jingqi pulled out a flat tin flask from his robe and took a swig. Hearing the question, he exclaimed, "Never heard of it? This is Pi Huang. The palace is quite enamored with it. When the Empress Dowager was alive, she insisted on hearing it at least 100 or 80 times a year and never grew weary of it." After finishing, he cleared his throat and declared, "Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy it, shall I perform another piece for you?" Although he asked, "Shall I?" he paid no heed to their responses and began to sing once more. Yang Dingyuan chuckled. "I never imagined Master Hua, despite being a eunuch, would possess such a resonant voice." The young eunuch's face paled, and he whispered, "Master Yang, I must confide in you when Master Hua arrives. Please do not mention that I told you we are eunuchs, all right?" "Why so?" The young eunuch sighed. "Master Hua despises being called a eunuch. Just now, that gentleman from Tianjin, who was chewing on that large loaf without water, ended up spitting it all over Master Hua. Master Hua would not let it go, and the two quarreled. The Tianjin gentleman claimed Master Hua was useless, which sparked Master Hua's fury, and no wonder Hu Jingqi still clutched a handkerchief." Yang Dingyuan understood that the so-called lieba referred to the large bread favored by Russians. The northeastern region is home to many Russians, and Harbin itself was established by them. However, the outcome of their quarrel was likely unexpected even for the Tianjin man. Hu Jingqi seemed to tire from singing and approached the sleeping quarters. Noticing Xiao was sitting on Yang Dingyuan's bed, he glared and bellowed, "You little rascal, do you not see that I am thirsty from singing? Fetch me a cup of water." Xiao was scurried away, much like a mouse fleeing from a cat. Yang Dingyuan quickly interjected, "Master Hua, please sit. Your voice is truly remarkable." Upon hearing praise for his vocal prowess, Hu Jingqi's face broke into a smile. "Lord Yang, you flatter me. Throughout my life, I have engaged in two pursuits. One is the art of martial combat, and the other is the occasional singing. Have you had the pleasure of hearing any before?" Yang Dingyuan shook his head, and, back in my hometown, we only have Zhaobang opera, which is performed during the New Year festivities and continues into spring. I have not encountered Zhaobang opera, but what about the Lord's Play? The so-called Lord's Play refers to the tales of Guan Yu. Yang Dingyuan replied, "Certainly, there are such performances. What you sang earlier was also a piece from Lord's Play, wasn't it?" As the topic of performance arose, Hu Jingqi seemed invigorated, momentarily forgetting his earlier fatigue from singing. He raised his voice, indeed. In the past, the most revered performances in the palace were those of the lords, for our Emperor Qianlong is the reincarnation of Liu Bei, thus the lords safeguarded the Qing dynasty. Once, as Emperor Qianlong descended from the Golden Lawn Hall, he suddenly heard a commotion behind him. Fearing an assassin, he turned to look but found no one. With his great fortune and wisdom, he inquired, "Which divine being is here to protect me?" A voice from the air responded, "It is your second brother, Yin Chong." Realizing he was the reincarnation of Emperor Zhaolai, Qianlong casually asked, "Where's my third brother?" To which the Lord in the heavens replied, "He is guarding Liaoyang." Upon hearing that his third brother also had reincarnated, the emperor asked, "And where is my fourth brother?" The Lord answered, "He has been born into the Zhao family." Delighted, Qianlong declared, "I shall issue a decree tomorrow to bestow upon my virtuous brother the title of the ancient Buddha of heaven, with the likes of Buddha and the Jade Emperor coming under his jurisdiction." Yet, the Lord cautioned that Zhuge Liang had also reincarnated in the court, and he might remember the Lord's past refusal to heed his advice regarding the East's alliance with Sun Quan and the North's rejection of Cao Cao, which led to the great disaster of losing Jingzhou and considerable chaos. Yang Dingyuan, captivated by the tale, could not resist asking, what transpired thereafter? The following day, as Qianlong convened the court and issued the decree to honor the Lord as the ancient Buddha of heaven, someone stepped forward, saying, "Your Majesty, this cannot be." Upon casting his keen eyes, Qianlong recognized none other than Liu Luoba, the father of Liu Tianguan, known to you as Prime Minister Liu from Shandong. It dawned on him that this man was the reincarnation of Zhuge Liang. Recalling the Lord's mention of the third brother guarding Liaoyang, an inquiry into the records revealed that it was Zhang Guangxi who held that post. Qianlong summoned Zhang Guangxi to the capital with a golden decree. However, Zhang San had already undergone reincarnation during the Song dynasty, changing his surname but not his name. The previous reincarnation had been that of Lord Yu, who had been wrongfully summoned back by 12 golden edicts, and upon seeing the golden decree again, Zhang Guangxi, filled with trepidation, took his own life by swallowing gold. Upon hearing this matter, Emperor Qianlong felt a profound sense of regret. He recalled that his fourth brother, Zhao Zilong, was also in court, and upon investigation, discovered that it was indeed General Zhao Hui, the commander of the Nine Gates. Thus, he refrained from exposing the truth, and instead continuously bestowed honors upon him, elevating his title to that of the Prince of Pingnan. General Zhao captured Nian Gingyao and Ping Zhuanggarl, becoming a fortuitous figure in our dynasty. Once Wu Jingqi began recounting the tale, he could hardly contain himself, until the young eunuch, Xiaohua, brought him a cup of water, prompting him to finally pause and drink. A man across from him, intrigued by his narrative, couldn't help but interject, "But now, the great Qing has fallen." Hu Jingqi nearly choked on his drink, unable to retort, and merely rolled his eyes in response. Fearing he might lose face, Yang Dingyuan quickly remarked, "Master Hua is indeed a repository of ancient tales. I have never heard such stories before." With this opportunity to descend from the awkward moment, Hu Jingqi handed the cup to the young eunuch and sighed, "Alas, it is of no use, one must still toil for a meal." "How long, Master Yang? Until we reach our destination?" "We have just departed from Harbin. It will take at least 10 days to 2 weeks, replied Yang Dingyuan. Hu Jingqi seemed taken aback by the distance, momentarily speechless, and simply sighed again before returning to his bunk. For the remainder of the day, he did not leave his berth, but merely hummed operatic verses, while Yang Dingyuan listened to the entirety of crossing 5 passes from below. The western terminus of the central route is Chita. That evening, the train arrived at the station of Manzhouli. Manzhouli, being on the Chinese border, was under the jurisdiction of the Russians, hence, the train was required to halt for 2 days to await customs inspection. After being cooped up for so long, the passengers eagerly disembarked to stretch their legs. Although Yang Dingyuan had nowhere to go, he too stepped off the train. Upon disembarking, he was greeted by a landscape of pristine white snow, a thick layer blanketing the ground. The air exhaled from people's mouths was dense and white, resembling a thick cloud hovering above the crowd. He scooped up a handful of snow to wipe his face, surveying his surroundings. Although Manzhouli was within Chinese territory, it was governed by Russians, and the station was bustling with many Russian merchants, most of whom could speak a few words of Chinese. Upon seeing the passengers disembark, they rushed over to attract business. Aware that most Chinese visitors were likely short on funds, they flocked to the Russians instead. Yang Dingyuan, surrounded by the unfamiliar sound of rapid Russian, understood not a word and, lacking money, wandered aimlessly to ease his mind. A border town, Manzhouli, though not extensive in size, was remarkably vibrant, with a marketplace brimming with shops selling furs, fish, meat, sugar, tea, and textiles. The chilly weather caused the fish and meat to hang frozen beneath the eaves, and the vendors' shouts were often interspersed with snippets of Russian. How delightful it would be to learn the language. Yang Dingyuan mused as he approached a food stall. The shop offered enticing bread and sausages, and the proprietor was enthusiastically calling out in fluent Russian, his words flowing in a delightful cascade. Upon spotting Yang Dingyuan's approach, the shopkeeper beamed with a smile and switched to Mandarin, saying, "Esteemed guest, what would you like? Bread? Sausages? Everything is fresh, and one bite is both fragrant and savory." Yang Dingyuan hesitated for a moment and inquired, "May I ask where you learned to speak Russian?" The shopkeeper chuckled. "What is there to learn? With enough listening, it comes naturally. In Manzhouli, there are Russians everywhere. Spend a year or so, and you will surely pick it up." While there was some truth to his words, they felt rather uninformative. Yang Dingyuan wished to ask again, but a voice from behind interrupted him. "Is that not Brother Yang?" The voice was unfamiliar, and Yang Dingyuan was surprised to find someone recognizing him here. Turning around, he saw a man standing behind him, clad in coarse fabric, of short stature, but with an energetic demeanor. He said, "I share the surname Yang. May I inquire your name?" The short man smiled broadly, clasping his fists in greeting. "Have you forgotten me, Brother Yang? I am Sang, the one who traveled with you in the same carriage." It turned out he was also a fellow laborer from the camp. Yang Dingyuan had not spoken much on the train and did not recall this short fellow, but given the warm salutation, he reciprocated with a fist salute. "Ah, so, it is Brother Sang. Just call me the short one, as everyone else does. Brother Yang, are you out for a stroll too? In this cold weather, let us drink together." Without waiting for Yang Dingyuan to respond, the short man purchased several large sausages from the shop and beckoned Yang Dingyuan to follow him. Yang Dingyuan took a couple of steps behind him, ready to decline, but the short man had already reached a nearby tavern. Noticing that Yang Dingyuan had not followed, he turned and said, "Brother Yang, all men are brothers under heaven, come on." The short man's gaze, usually friendly, suddenly became piercing, fixated intently on Yang Dingyuan. Not it was him. In that instant, Yang Dingyuan nearly exclaimed. This was the very gaze he had sensed on the train, the one that had made his heart race. And it was the short man who had been watching him all along. He immediately understood that this fellow named Sang was not merely seeking a drink out of chance. He clearly had ulterior motives. If he resisted entering, who knew what might unfold? Yang Dingyuan scrutinized him, feigning ignorance, and said, "Brother Sang, I'm not much of a drinker. Perhaps it is not appropriate." The menace in the short man's eyes softened slightly, replaced by a hint of mockery. "Are you not a man? A man who cannot drink is hardly a man at all. Come inside, my elder brother wishes to meet you." The short man pushed open the door, but did not enter, instead gesturing for Yang Dingyuan to go ahead. It seemed that if Yang Dingyuan did not comply, the short man would not relent. At this juncture, Yang Dingyuan found himself with no other options, steeling his resolve and contemplating. "I bear him no grudge. He cannot possibly harm me." With a slight bow, he stepped inside the T.O. shield against the biting cold at the entrance. A thin quilt was hung. Upon lifting the quilt, a wave of warmth surged forth outside. The world lay blanketed in snow and ice. Yet within, the space was so crowded that one could almost break into a sweat. The small fellow, seeing the newcomer, led him to a private room and, pushing the door open, said, "Brother." Inside, a large Kong was occupied by 5 or 6 individuals. The small man approached the edge of the Kong, placing a large sausage on the table, and whispered, "Brother, I went out to buy sausages and happened to run into Brother Yang. So I brought him along." That a man seated cross-legged at the edge of the Kong lifted his gaze to regard Yang Dingyuan. The moment their eyes met, Yang Dingyuan felt a momentary jolt. This man, not particularly tall and possessing a fair and refined appearance, had eyes as sharp as those of a hawk. If the small man's gaze were akin to 2 glaring daggers, then this man's eyes concealed a hidden depth, a subtle yet formidable intensity. Upon recognizing Yang Dingyuan, a slight smile appeared on his face as he beckoned. "Brother Yang, come, sit, have a drink. The liquor here is quite good." Yang Dingyuan hesitated as he approached. The small man clapped him on the back and thrust a bowl of liquor into his hands, insisting, "Drink." With a wry smile, Yang Dingyuan replied, "I left all my money at home. I don't have a single coin on me." The small fellow had forcibly brought him in, and the mysterious demeanor of the group sparked a flicker of wariness in him. He thought it best to clarify matters up front to avoid any unnecessary complications. The The small man was taken aback for a moment, but quickly chuckled, truly a filial son. Drink yours, I made a friend of you. As he spoke, he pulled out a small knife from his waist and sliced the sausage into segments, piling them onto a large plate on the table. Yang Dingyuan held the bowl of liquor, pondering that refusing to drink would not bode well. He raised the bowl to his lips, only to be met with a potent aroma that assaulted his senses. The liquor from the northeast is notoriously strong. These taverns, known as shaogua, brew their own spirits while also offering lodging. Mustering his resolve, he downed the liquor, only to feel as if a fiery line had been driven straight into him, overwhelming and almost igniting his insides, bringing tears to his eyes and nearly forcing a cough. The people on the Kong erupted in laughter, and the sharp-eyed man joined in, saying, "Brother Yang, this liquor is quite fierce. Do not drink too hastily. Here, have a piece of sausage to temper it." The sausage, known as li daos, was filled with pork and fat. Though served cold, the cross-section revealed glistening white fat. However, upon tasting it, only the rich flavor of meat emerged, alleviating somewhat the fiery sting of the liquor. As he chewed on the sausage, someone on the Kong made space for him, encouraging him to sit. "Take your time, brother." Yang Dingyuan still remained uncertain of the intentions behind these individuals, yet they were unexpectedly jovial, exhibiting no hostility. He surveyed the surroundings and noticed, sitting in a corner, the man from Anhui who had engaged in gambling on the train. This man remained silent, merely drinking and eating, casting not a glance at Yang Dingyuan, exuding an air of gloom. "Brother Yang, I am Yin Chunshan." The sharp-eyed man introduced himself. The man with hawk-like eyes spoke in a low voice. Though his words were softly uttered, the moment he began to speak, silence enveloped those around him, rendering his voice crystal clear. Yang Dingyuan lifted his gaze to meet Yin Chunshan's and said, "It is a pleasure to meet you, Brother Yin. You hail from Shandong and are literate, am I correct?" Yang Dingyuan was momentarily taken aback. Yin Chunshan seemed to perceive his confusion and smiled, saying, "I noticed you writing in your diary on the train. We are in need of someone who can read and write. Would you be willing to assist us?" Yang Dingyuan was even more astonished. So, they had been observing him for that reason. The train was filled with laborers, and it was rare to find anyone who could read, let alone write a diary. He replied, "What is it that Brother Yin needs from me?" Yin Chunshan lifted his wine bowl and took a small sip before responding, "There are many matters at hand, but I cannot divulge too much at this moment. We are also heading to Russia in search of fortune. It is prudent to band together while we are away, is it not?" Noticing Yang Dingyuan nodding, he continued, "We are still in China for now, but we shall arrive in Russia tomorrow. However, this vast expanse of land was originally ours, seized by the Russian invaders. Are you aware of this?" Yang Dingyuan nodded again. Who was unaware of the Russians' usurpation of Chinese territory? This was merely a matter of decades past. Yin Chunshan continued, "Brother Yang, if your land were taken, your home invaded, and your sisters violated, would you not fight back with all your might?" Hearing Yin Chunshan's words, Yang Dingyuan felt a deeper shock. Although Yin Chunshan's tone was calm, it was laced with profound resentment, and he could not entangle himself with such matters. As they were heading to Russia, amidst a mix of people, he wished to avoid any involvement with secret societies. Contemplating this, Yang Dingyuan ceased to nod. Yin Chunshan, sensing his unease, raised his wine cup and said, "Very well, since this is our first encounter, there is no need to force anything. However, the events of today must remain confidential. Understood? Come, let us drink this bowl." Seeing the invitation to drink, Yang Dingyuan dared not act recklessly, repeatedly shaking his head and smiling wryly. "I dare not, Brother Yin. I am not well versed in drinking." Yin Chunshan smiled faintly. "Brother Yang, you may not be aware of the customs. This bowl of wine is a sealing wine. If you do not drink, it implies you have not agreed to my request." Earlier, his tone had been gentle, but now a keen sharpness glinted in his eyes, reminiscent of a hawk. Despite the heat in the room, Yang Dingyuan felt a chill run down his spine. Just as he was about to take the wine bowl, a hand reached out and seized it. It was a small man who placed his elbows on the table, holding the bowl close to his chest. Yang Dingyuan recalled the ancient tales told by elders. Realizing this was undoubtedly their underworld custom, if he refused to drink, he might not even be allowed to leave. Today, he took the bowl, steeled himself, and downed the contents in one gulp, only to find the small man offering him a piece of meat on a sharp knife. Bringing it to his lips, the gleaming blade hovered merely inches from his throat, poised to pierce Yang Dingyuan's vocal cords with a mere thrust. Steeling himself, Yang opened his mouth to bite down on the flesh, yet the knife did not advance. Instead, it withdrew. The diminutive figure beside him patted his shoulder, exclaiming, "Brave man." However, the morsel could no longer suppress the intoxicating fumes that lingered in his mouth. Yang felt his vision begin to blur when another individual approached him, saying, "Master Yang, please partake in this bowl of wine as well." If the drinking continued at this pace, he feared he might not return home this night. Yang accepted the bowl and drained it in one gulp, hastily placing it back on the table before the man could utter another word. "Gentlemen, I shall accept this favor today, and I assure you, I will repay it when the opportunity arises." The man seemed inclined to speak further, but Yin Chunshan interjected, "Enough, let it be. Little one, see Yang back to the train." "What's the rush? Wait a moment, the tavern girl won't sprout hair." Yang surmised that the small man was likely eager to encounter the tavern girl himself, and sending him along would surely be met with reluctance. These individuals were shrouded in mystery, entangling further with them could likely lead to trouble. So he declared, "There's no need, I can walk on my own." He had never been much of a drinker, and the potent liquor he consumed earlier churned violently within him. While standing still was manageable, moving about unleashed a tempest in his stomach, compelling him to stagger out the door. Upon exiting, a gust of wind laden with snowflakes struck his face. The chill brought him a degree of comfort, prompting him to scoop a handful of snow from the ground and rub it against his face. The fiery heat of his skin met with the snow like countless tiny daggers piercing him, yet the dizzying sensation began to subside that he steadied himself against the doorframe and glanced back. The door had closed. Inside, the raucous sounds had diminished significantly, merely a door separated him from what felt like a distant realm. Although warmth radiated from within, Yang felt as if he had just emerged from an ice cellar. Although Yin Chunshan did not appear overtly malevolent, Yang sensed an unsettling fear emanating from him. This seemingly genteel individual possessed an intangible authority, akin to a blade unsheathed, emanating an oppressive chill even from a mere glance. Strangely, standing in the snow felt more bearable than being inside. He battled his way toward the station, the liquor within him stirring unrest. The journey that once seemed short now felt interminable, as if he were traversing an endless distance. The wind intensified. As twilight deepened over this remote northern expanse of China, the wind acted as an inhospitable host, delivering a stark warning to all newcomers. Yang Dingyuan stumbled forward, gradually losing his ability to discern the path ahead, enveloped in a haze of white. The sky was dark, the ground a stark white, and every house appeared identical, cold and indifferent. What would the future hold? He suspected that Yin Chunshan and the diminutive ones were likely affiliated with some gang, and although he was unsure of the consequences of rejecting their advances, he felt a fleeting sense of relief in having evaded immediate danger. As for tomorrow, he would confront it when it arrived. He pressed on, determined not to fall. The shops had already closed for the night. Should he collapse on the street, he would be rendered immobile, deprived of any chance at a future. Time slipped by, and the wind and snow grew increasingly fierce, yet the station seemed to vanish without a trace. Just as despair began to settle in, a voice emerged from the thickening dusk. "Brothers, seasoned by countless battles on the field, we gathered joyfully in this ancient city. My ambitions are far from ordinary, my spirit resolute in pursuit of fame. Riding my steed, the swift red hare, I wield the green dragon crescent blade against the generals, relying on my chronicles of spring and autumn, achieving victory in every clash." It was the voice of Hua Jingqi. This segment was from a play about Guangdong, typically delivered with a vibrant resonance, yet amidst the swirling snow, it carried a sense of ambition. However, Hua Jingqi's voice, sharp and piercing, cut through the flurries like a freshly drawn blade, leaving Yang Dingyuan shivering in its wake. He lifted his gaze, following the sound, and in the snowy expanse, he discerned distant flickers of light. The train was indeed stationed ahead, obscured by the heavy snowfall, and most passengers had ventured into the town, leaving the train dimly lit. In no wonder he had failed to notice it until now. Hua Jingqi's piercing voice, which would ordinarily be grating, now seemed hauntingly desolate. Yang Dingyuan staggered toward the train, reaching the carriage door, but his stiff fingers felt as rigid as iron, unable to bend. He resorted to knocking forcefully twice. Inside, Hua Jingqi was soaking his feet. This marked the last day of his stay in China. The carriage was empty, the other passengers having taken the opportunity to indulge in revelry and seek companionship for the final evening. He and the young eunuch Xiao Hua could not find any companionship, so they remained aboard, relishing the rare tranquility. With no one left, the hot water on the train was plentiful, perfect for soaking feet. Hua Jingqi was thoroughly enjoying himself, and when his throat itched, he belted out a segment of Shoguan Ping to satisfy his craving. Suddenly, a noise at the carriage door caught his attention. Frowning, he instructed, "Little rascal, go see if anyone else has returned." Xiaohu complied and approached the door. As he pulled it open, a gust of wind laden with snow swept in, and with it, a figure abruptly burst into the carriage, startling Xiaohu. Upon closer inspection, he exclaimed, "Master Yang. It's Master Yang." Hearing the commotion, Yang Dingyuan stumbled in, his feet unwashed and still damp. As he approached, a strong scent of alcohol wafted through the air. This young rascal, drinking excessively despite his inexperience, returns in such weather. What a reckless endeavor. "Come, drag him inside," he commanded. Young eunuch Hua reached out to pull Yang Dingyuan, but the latter, clad in heavy garments and towering over the eunuch, remained as immovable as if he were glued to the ground. Growing impatient, Hua Jingqi shoved young eunuch Hua aside, exclaiming, "You worthless brat, your gluttonous indulgence has rendered you feeble. Let me handle this." He bent down, grasped Yang Dingyuan by the collar, and with considerable effort though, he felt the weight manage to hoist Yang onto the cart, barking, "Close the door quickly." This biting wind is no joke. Young eunuch complied, but, noticing Yang still sprawled on the floor, fearfully inquired, "Master, is Yang? Is he dead? How could he have made it here then?" "Spare me your foolish chatter, fetch some snow quickly. He is merely inebriated and has wandered through the cold for quite some time. The chill has seeped into his very soul." Young eunuch, hesitant to argue, fetched a handful of snow from outside. Meanwhile, Hua Jingqi unfastened Yang Dingyuan's clothing and vigorously rubbed the snow against his chest. His hands were strong, and soon he noticed a hint of color returning to Yang's face. "That's it. You brat, lift him onto the bed and fetch me a cup of hot water." Once the steaming water was consumed, Yang Dingyuan opened his eyes. Relieved to see him awake, Hua Jingqi exhaled, "You've narrowly escaped death, Yang. What possessed you to drink like a fool? Do you think the frigid nights beyond the pass are akin to those of Shandong?" Yang Dingyuan could not articulate that he had merely wished to avoid lingering with Yin Chunshan and the others. He propped himself up and said, "Master Hua, I am grateful for your assistance. Spare me the formalities your intoxication has yet to dissipate. You should rest now. Once the effects wear off, you'll surely be shivering." Hua Jingqi had intended to enjoy a quiet nap, but Yang's presence had disrupted his peace, leaving him slightly irritable. Observing Hua's displeasure, Yang refrained from further conversation. After all, Hua Jingqi had saved his life. Noticing young eunuch was still lingering nearby, he urged, "Young Hua, I am fine now. You should retire as well." Young eunuch Hua, accustomed to Hua Jingqi's commands, replied obediently, "Yes, Master Yang. Should you require anything, just call for me." Yang Dingyuan adjusted his blanket. With no one else in the cart, Hua Jingqi had moved the stove close to the bed, a kettle simmering atop, steam wafting from its spout. Yang lay there, somewhat dazed, gazing at the oil lamp hanging from the cart ceiling, suddenly overwhelmed by a profound sense of emptiness. The journey ahead is long, and the days stretch out before him. Yet, what will the future hold? He pondered in confusion as the melodious voice of Hua Jingqi resonated in his ears. Alas, the turmoil of the world. The 10 eunuchs of the Han dynasty have usurped power, leading the nation astray. They conspire against the virtuous, plunging the populace into despair. Families suffer from hunger and cold, enduring years of drought and hardship. When shall we ever witness a year of peace? The voice gradually faded. Outside the train, the wind howled fiercely, seeping through the cracks like a sharp blade, and Hua Jingqi's voice diminished until it was finally replaced by the sound of snoring. Who exactly are these people? Yang Dingyuan sat on a narrow bunk of the train, having just inscribed the last word in his diary for the day when he suddenly shivered. This was a troop transport carriage, a cramped space equipped with 50 bunk beds, where even standing room was scarce except for a narrow aisle running through the center. It felt somewhat incongruous to take out pen and paper to write in such an environment, but the carriage was filled with newly recruited laborers from various regions, all strangers to one another. Given that Yang Dingyuan's bunk was situated in the far corner, no one paid him any heed. However, he was abruptly struck by an intense, piercing gaze directed straight at him from the crowd, making him profoundly uncomfortable. He lifted his head, attempting to discern who it might be, but all he could see was a sea of unfamiliar faces, a dense throng of strangers, rendering it impossible to identify anyone who might be observing him. Could it be that, having just departed from Harbin, someone had already formed an enmity towards him? Yang Dingyuan tucked away his diary and writing materials, lying back on his bunk, gazing blankly at the ceiling. Yang Dingyuan, hailing from Rongcheng in Shandong province, was born in 1894 and had just turned 21 this year. At such a tender age, he could still be considered a youth, yet his gaze bore an unusually mature depth. His family belonged to the ranks of ordinary farmers. His father, illiterate throughout his life, had resolutely vowed to ensure that Yang Dingyuan received an education after his birth. However, after a few years of attending a private school, the family's financial struggles forced him to seek work at a young age. Despite a life of arduous labor, he never relinquished the habit of keeping a diary, carrying it with him wherever he went. The train emitted a long, strained whistle, laboring its way out of Harbin Station. Ahead lay a vast expanse of forest, resembling an unfathomable abyss that seemed to consume everything in its path, leaving no trace behind. This was a scheduled train on the Chinese Eastern Railway, originally known as the Dongqing Railway, constructed after the First Sino-Japanese War under duress from Russia, compelling the Qing court to sign the Sino-Russian Secret Agreement. This railway stretches from Chita in the west to Swafen in the east, with a branch line from Harbin directly reaching Lushan, effectively linking Siberia with northeast China. Through this railway, Russians continuously streamed towards the far east, gradually encroaching upon the northeast's vast landscapes, while large numbers of Chinese, in search of livelihood, left their homes to venture into the Siberian wilderness. The carriage was crowded, but fortunately, the cold weather prevented any foul odors from perspiration, yet it was still stifling, making it hard to breathe. Yang Dingyuan rested his head on his bundle, lost in thought. Xinzhong must also be on his way back home. Now, he wondered what he might say upon seeing his parents. The lofty ambitions he had upon departing had now dissipated entirely, leaving him with but a singular thought. To survive that to venture into the east was a phrase often uttered by Shandong people. In these times, there were no more heroes in Liangshan to whom one could turn for refuge. Thus, for laborers like him, it seemed that the only path remaining was to brave the east. Yet, venturing east was no easy task. Xinzhong must have realized that by now. He mused, unable to suppress a bitter smile. Yang Dingyuan was originally an apprentice at a sock factory in Weihai, regarded as quite successful by his fellow villagers in Rongcheng. After completing his training, due to his proficient skills, Boss Zhou from the sock factory opened a new branch in Harbin and invited Yang to serve as a master weaver there. A childhood friend, Chun Xinzhong, upon hearing of Yang's journey to Harbin, was eager to accompany him at that time. Many Shandong natives were venturing eastward, and Chen had heard numerous tales of their prosperous returns, leading him to believe that Harbin was a land of opportunity. Along with them were two more men from Shozhong, making it a party of four. That upon their arrival in Harbin, the bustling city filled them with excitement, but that joy quickly faded into disappointment within a few months. The owner of the Harbin branch, a relative of Boss Zhou, held a disdainful view of Shandong people. While Boss Zhou was strict with his employees, the branch owner was even harsher. After a year of labor, Yang found himself not only without earnings, but also in debt to the factory, prompting him and Chun to contemplate returning home. However, with no money to their names, Yang felt utterly trapped until he stumbled upon a recruitment office seeking workers for Russia. At that time, the Bayong government had allied with the Entente powers in World War I, necessitating that China provide laborers for the Allies. The Fuya Company in Harbin was responsible for this task, offering $10 upon signing up. With determination, Yang enrolled and handed over the entire sum to Chun, urging him to return home. From that moment on, he realized he was leaving his homeland, uncertain of when he might return. Thoughts of his parents' graying hair filled him with melancholy. The eastern terminus of the Middle East road was Chita, but their journey would lead them further west, to an unknown land. As he pondered this, a boisterous voice suddenly broke through his thoughts. Come, come, sitting idle is no fun. Place a bet, and test your luck. Buy it, and it's yours. The speaker had a strong Anhui accent, his voice resonating throughout the cramped train car. The compartment was filled with laborers, and with a little money, they engaged in two pursuits: gambling and vice. While the latter was not feasible on the train, gambling was an ever-present option. The Anhui man continued to rattle dice in a bowl, the clattering sound attracting several onlookers who crowded around him, the air thick with their raucous banter. Yang had never gambled. He recalled his father's admonition from his youth. Gambling could lead to ruin, and it was better to lead an honest life. Yet, the incessant sounds of betting pierced his ears like sharp needles, preventing him from finding rest. He turned over, hoping for some respite from the noise, when a sharp voice interrupted him. "Big brother, could you please make way?" Yang lifted his head to see a young lad standing before him with a basin of water. He paused, startled, as a voice from the upper bunk cursed, "You little brat, it took you this long to bring me water." Before he could finish his words, darkness enveloped his vision, as someone leapt down from the upper bunk. Although this individual was not as tall as Yang Dingyuan, his descent was accompanied by only a slight sound. Yang Dingyuan was momentarily taken aback, pondering, this person is evidently skilled. The newcomer, upon landing, boldly addressed Yang Dingyuan, saying, "Brother, please make way, I need to wash my feet." The carriage was filled with impoverished men heading to Russia for labor, leaving Yang Dingyuan perplexed about the stranger's origins. His attire was unremarkable, yet impeccably tidy, particularly highlighted by a long, glossy braid trailing from the back of his head. In the 4th year of the Republic, most had already cut off their braids. This man, however, cherished his, adorning the tip with a moon-white satin bow. Yang Dingyuan recalled having seen such a style in his childhood, yet it had become increasingly rare in recent years. He stepped aside, and the man, noticing Yang Dingyuan's unhesitant compliance, grinned broadly and said, "Thank you, brother." He then turned to a young lad and sternly commanded, "You, bring me the basin." The boy placed a copper basin beneath the bunk, and the man unwrapped his foot coverings, plunging his feet into the water with a grin, exclaiming, "Ah, how refreshing." Outside, the world was enveloped in ice and snow, though the carriage was warm from the crowd. Washing one's feet in cold water could hardly be considered pleasant. Nevertheless, the man appeared to genuinely relish the experience, vigorously scrubbing his feet. In truth, his feet were cleaner than most, yet he insisted on washing them meticulously, as if he were determined to cleanse even the spaces between his toes. While washing, he addressed Yang Dingyuan, saying, "Brother, I apologize for the inconvenience, it's just my nature. If I don't wash my feet, I can't sleep soundly at night. By the way, my surname is Hua Jingqi. May I inquire your esteemed name?" Despite his somewhat oblivious demeanor, Hua Jingqi spoke with a degree of politeness. Yang Dingyuan responded, "My surname is Yang, Master Hua." Upon being addressed as Master, Hua Jingqi seemed to take great delight, grinning wider as he replied, "Ah, so you are Master Yang. May I ask how you are addressed?" Hua Jingqi's words were somewhat formal, prompting Yang Dingyuan to adopt a more respectful tone. He clasped his hands together and replied, "My given name is Dingyuan." Hua Jingqi paused, seemingly impressed, and remarked, "Oh, what an imposing name. Ban Dingyuan." Indeed, Yang Dingyuan managed a wry smile, thinking to himself that Hua Jingqi must have read a few books. His name had been bestowed upon him by his father, who had asked Mr. Who from the private school to choose it, with M.Hu claiming that his eyes shone like bright stars, destined for great ambitions, and that one day he would make a name for himself in foreign lands, hence the name. Of course, his father was unaware of the historical figure Ban Dingyuan. Later, Yang Dingyuan had indeed studied a bit and was somewhat familiar with the exploits of Ban Chao. He had also enlisted after a few years of schooling, finding a parallel in that regard with Ban Chao, yet in all other aspects, they were entirely unconnected. Hua Jingqi continued to wash his feet, perhaps accustomed to the cold water, as he squinted his eyes, exhibiting a look of satisfaction, all the while saying Ban Dingyuan was one of the 28 generals of Yantai, right? I recall the days of Han Guangwa's eastern expeditions and western campaigns, with Ma Wu and Sin Peng true heroes. I say, you young lad, dispose of the dirty water. After drying his feet with the foot cloth, Hua Jingqi, mindful of the cleanliness of the floor, retrieved a pair of straw sandals from beneath the bunk. In the northeast, there are 3 treasures: ginseng, deer antler, and a plant known as woollygrass. Although woollygrass may not possess the monetary value of ginseng or deer antler, it is said that shoes crafted from this grass can keep one's feet warm even in the harshest of winters in the northeastern region. These shoes are considered an essential item, thus earning their place among the treasures. Hua Jingqi, having donned his shoes, inclined his body toward Yang Dingyuan and said, "Brother, I apologize for the disturbance until we meet again." With that, he swiftly placed a hand on the edge of the bed and leapt up to the upper bunk. The young man, however, dutifully took the basin of foot-washing water and stepped into the corridor to dispose of it before settling onto the bunk beside Yang Dingyuan. Who exactly are these 2 individuals? Yang Dingyuan pondered. Hua Jingqi, occupying the upper bunk, was evidently not the owner of that gaze which had stirred a slight unease within him. Was this enigmatic figure truly observing him, or was it merely a figment of his imagination? The more he contemplated, the more unsettled he became. The carriage was dimly illuminated by a single oil lamp, its flickering light dancing in tandem with the train's motion, casting a rhythmic interplay of shadows and brightness. Before Yang Dingyuan's eyes, The sounds of gambling nearby erupted into boisterous cheers, mingling with the train's steady clatter, gradually fading into the depths of his encroaching slumber. He fell into a deep sleep, embarking on an extensive dream. In this dream, he found himself back in his hometown of Rongcheng, yet all he could see were the graves of his parents, the old family home in a state of utter disrepair. When he inquired with a neighbor, he was met with blank stares. I am Yang Dingyuan, he insisted, but those who had watched him grow up responded, Yang Dingyuan has long since passed away. His parents awaited their son's return until their eyes were blinded by tears. You cannot possibly be Yang Dingyuan. In his dream, he grew desperate and cried out, if I'm not Yang Dingyuan, then who am I? Yet, no matter how fervently he asserted his identity, others remained unconvinced. Someone handed him a mirror, saying, if you claim to be Yang Dingyuan, then look for yourself. He took the mirror and beheld a face weathered by the trials of life. Yet he did not recognize the reflection as anything but his own. Just then, a distant voice seemed to resonate in his ears, singing, dust and wind have buried my heroism, 20 years pass in a fleeting dream. Yang Dingyuan had never heard such a song before, and it dawned on him that he was indeed dreaming. The rhythmic clatter of the train echoed loudly in his ears, yet the song persisted, growing clearer. With lofty aspirations, yet thwarted by fate, what use is this treasured blade? He opened his eyes to find a shaft of sunlight streaming through the crack of the train door, illuminating his face. Turning his head slightly, he saw Hua Jingqi standing in the corridor, one hand holding a sweat towel, while the other pointed at a man seated on the lower bunk opposite him. A melody was emanating from Hua Jingqi's lips. How had he begun to sing? Yang Dingyuan was momentarily taken aback. That moment, Hua Jingqi reached the final note, placing a significant emphasis on the word use, which starkly contrasted his usual sharp tone. As the last word fell, many nearby applauded enthusiastically, including the man who was the target of Hua Jingqi's pointed finger. Hua Jingqi wore a beaming smile, basking in the praise from those around him. With a flourish, he flicked his sweat towel and dusted off his clothes, striking a pose before performing a circular bow. He exclaimed, I am Hua Jingqi from Hejin Prefecture. Thank you all for your kind presence. Have you heard of the two Hua from the 8 Extremes school? The person across from him appeared momentarily stunned and retorted, that's not right. Hua Yuanjia is from Tianjin. He is a master of the mysterious arts, not of the 8 Extremes school. Indeed, the individual spoke with a distinct Tianjin accent. Yang Dingyuan had heard of a Hua Yuanjia who ran a medicinal herb shop in Tianjin and was quite skilled. However, he was unfamiliar with the mysterious arts and the 8 Extremes school. Hua Jingqi, looking down upon him, remarked, enough, Hua Yuanjia may have some skill in Tianjin, but in Beijing, he is no standing. My master is a grandmaster of the 8 Extremes Fist, surnamed Li, with the sobriquet Shuan. I'm his foremost disciple. I have a junior brother, also surnamed Hua, named Hua Dinga. Have you heard of him? The Tianjin man shook his head. I have not. You must be a frog in a well, lacking in worldly experience. Our 8 Extremes school boasts 6 great openings and 8 great techniques, with techniques such as 3 unconcerned at the door and tiger climbing the mountain. Brother, you truly seem untrained, that we cannot take advantage of you. If you were skilled, we would certainly give you a display today. With that, Hua Jingqi became even more animated, draping the towel over his shoulder, striking a stance, and proclaiming, the 8 Extremes Fist strikes like a cow lying down. Though the area may seem small, it possesses immense power, capable of shattering your brain and breaking your bones. As he spoke enthusiastically, Yang Dingyuan noticed the youth beside him, the one who had brought Hua Jingqi warm water for his feet yesterday, slightly curling his lip. He quietly asked, is Master Hua your elder brother? The youth turned to see it was Yang Dingyuan and replied softly, sort of. What did you do before? Were you in the escort business? The youth shook his head. We are eunuchs from the palace. Yang Dingyuan was taken aback. The term eunuch referred to the castrated officials of the former Qing dynasty. He hadn't anticipated that both Hua Jingqi and this boy were eunuchs, and he found it perplexing that they, too, sought to make a living abroad, just as he did. His curiosity piqued. He began to engage in quiet conversation with the youth. Though the boy was not particularly talkative, he felt at ease with Yang Dingyuan's friendly demeanor and lowered his guard. It turned out that the boy also bore the surname Hua Jingqi, was once a sword-wielding eunuch in the palace, while the young Hua served as his attendant. After the fall of the Qing dynasty, when Feng Yuxiang entered Beijing and expelled the imperial family from the Forbidden City, these eunuchs found themselves at a loss and scattered. Hua Jingqi, originally a respected eunuch, had accumulated some wealth and opened a mutton restaurant outside the palace, earning a decent living. He indulged in leisure, enjoying bird watching and opera, posing as a gentleman. However, on one occasion, he overstepped and offended a bearded general who sought his head. Despite losing all his money from the restaurant, he could not resolve the matter and ultimately had to flee to the northeast, where in order to survive, he ended up in a labor camp. When Yang Dingyuan inquired why he did not seek refuge with his fellow disciples of the Baji sect, the young eunuch, Xiaohua, merely curled his lip and replied, "He hardly qualifies as a member of the Baji sect. Master Li would never take in a eunuch. He has merely picked up a smattering of knowledge within the palace and is now trying to cling on to something greater. Master Li has likely never even heard of his name." Although his spirits were not particularly high, Yang Dingyuan could not help but chuckle. The grains of the earth nurture countless individuals, and indeed, Hui Jingqi was quite a character. He glanced around at the faces nearby, most of which appear monotonously similar. Perhaps among them were many who, like Hui Jingqi, harbored astonishing pasts. Yet, what purpose could the one who had been secretly observing him possibly have? Seemingly still caught up in his enthusiasm, Hui Jingqi rambled on and then burst into song again. Now aware of his status as a eunuch, Yang Dingyuan found himself no longer curious about that piercing voice of his. Though his singing was not particularly melodious, it carried an unusual sense of desolation. With his eyes closed, it felt as though he were not in a cramped carriage, but rather in a vast expanse of wilderness, with the wind howling around him. Once Hui Jingqi finished a verse, applause erupted from the crowd, with someone calling out, "Master Hua, what play is this? I've never heard of it." At this, Hui Jingqi produced a flat tin flask from his pocket and took a swig. Upon hearing the inquiry, he declared loudly, "Never heard of it? This is Pi Huang. The palace is quite fond of it. When the Empress Dowager was alive, she insisted on hearing it at least 180 times each year, and she never grew weary of it." After stating this, he cleared his throat and added, "If you all enjoy it, shall I perform another piece for everyone?" Despite his rhetorical question, he paid no heed to the audience's response and began to sing once more. As he launched into another song, oblivious to those around him, Yang Dingyuan couldn't help but laugh. "I never expected Master Hua, despite being a eunuch, to possess such a resounding voice." Xiao Hua's face turned pale, and in a hushed tone, he cautioned, "Master Yang, I must tell you something. When Master Hua arrives, please do not mention that I informed you about us being eunuchs, all right?" "Why?" Xiao Hua sighed. Master Hua detests being called a eunuch. Just earlier, that gentleman from Tianjin was gnawing on some large loaf of bread without water, and he ended up spraying Master Hua's face. Master Hua did not take kindly to it, and they got into an argument. That gentleman from Tianjin claimed Master Hua was useless, which is why Master Hua became so animated. No wonder Hui Jingqi was still clutching a handkerchief. Yang Dingyuan understood that the so-called liuba referred to the large bread favored by Russians. There were many Russians in the northeastern regions, and Harbin was indeed built by them. However, the outcome of their quarrel must have caught even the Tianjin man by surprise. Exhausted from singing, Hui Jingqi approached the bunk, and upon seeing Xiao was seated on Yang Dingyuan's bed, he glared and commanded, "You little rascal, do you not see that I am parched from singing? Fetch me a cup of water." Xiao was scurried away like a mouse fleeing from a cat. Yang Dingyuan quickly interjected, "Master Hua, please take a seat. Your voice is truly remarkable." Hui Jingqi, upon receiving compliments about his voice, displayed a smile and remarked, "You flatter me, Master Yang. Throughout my life, I have engaged in two pursuits, practicing martial arts and singing a few tunes. Have you ever heard me sing before?" Yang Dingyuan shook his head, replying, "No, in my hometown, we only have Zhaobang opera, which is performed by troops during the New Year festivities until spring arrives." Hui Jingqi, intrigued, inquired, "What about Laoyi opera? Have you heard of it?" Laoyi opera refers to the performances centered around the legendary figure Guangong. Yang Dingyuan confirmed, "Indeed, we have that. The piece you sang earlier was also Laoyi opera, correct?" As the conversation turned to opera, Hui Jingqi's enthusiasm reignited, seemingly forgetting his earlier fatigue and thirst. He raised his voice and stated precisely, "In the past, the imperial court favored Lao Yi, for our Emperor Qianlong is a reincarnation of Liu Bei, thus Lao Yi safeguarded the Qing dynasty." Once, as Emperor Qianlong descended from the Golden Wan Hall, he heard a sudden sound behind him. Fearing an assassin, he turned to look but found no one. With great fortune and wisdom, he inquired, "Which divine being provides protection?" To his surprise, a voice from the air responded, "It is your second brother, Yin Chong." Realizing he was the reincarnation of Emperor Zhao Lai, he casually asked, "Where is the third brother?" To which the voice replied, "The third brother guards Liu Yang." Upon hearing that his third brother had also been reincarnated, Emperor Qianlong inquired, "And where might the fourth brother be?" The voice answered, "Born within the walls of the Zhao family." Delighted, the emperor declared, "I shall issue an edict tomorrow to bestow upon my virtuous brother the title of the ancient Buddha of the heavens, with authority over even the Tathagata and the Jade Emperor." That moment, the voice cautioned that Zhuge Liang had also been reborn in the court, and might remember how Lao Yi had disregarded his counsel to ally with Sun Quan against Chao, leading to significant calamity in Jingzhou. Yang Dingyuan, captivated by the tale, could not restrain his curiosity and asked, "What transpired next?" Hua Jingxi continued, "The following day, as Emperor Qianlong convened the court to issue the edict to honor Lao Yi as the ancient Buddha of the heavens, someone from the assembly stepped forward, declaring, 'Your Majesty must not do this.' Upon glancing with his imperial gaze, the emperor recognized the speaker as Lu Luohua, Lu Tianguan's father, known as Prime Minister Lu from Shandong. The emperor then understood he was the reincarnation of Prime Minister Zhuge. Remembering that his third brother was said to guard Liaoyang, he consulted the records and discovered that the actual guardian was Zhang Guangxi. An edict was issued, summoning Zhang Guangxi to the capital. However, Zhang San had previously undergone a reincarnation during the Song dynasty, changing his surname but not his given name. The one who had been summoned back by 12 golden edicts was none other than Lord Yu, who had been wrongfully executed. After his reincarnation, he could not bear the sight of golden edicts. Upon being summoned by the golden decree, Zhang Guangxi, filled with trepidation, took his own life by swallowing gold. Hearing this matter, Emperor Qianlong felt an overwhelming sense of regret. He recalled that his fourth brother, Zhao Zilong, was also in the court. Upon investigation, it was indeed the commander of the Nine Gates, Zhao Hui, who was involved. Daunted by the implications, he refrained from exposing the truth and instead conferred successive titles upon him, eventually elevating him to the rank of Prince Pingnan. General Zhao, having captured Yin Gungyao and quelled the turmoil in Gansu, became a celebrated figure in our dynasty. Whenever Hua Jingxi spoke of it, he could hardly contain himself. At that moment, the young eunuch who brought him a cup of water, prompting him to finally pause and take a sip. A man across from him, amused by his tales, could not help but interject, "But alas, the great Qing has perished." Hua Jingxi nearly choked on his drink, yet found himself speechless, merely rolling his eyes in response. Yang Dingyuan, concerned for his dignity, quickly remarked, "Master Hua truly possesses a wealth of knowledge. I have never heard such stories before." Grateful for the timely intervention, Hua Jingxi passed the cup to the young eunuch and sighed, "It is all in vain now. We must still toil for our sustenance." "How much longer until we reach our destination, Master Yang?" "We have just departed from Harbin. It will take at least 10 to 15 days, Yang replied. Hua Jingxi seemed taken aback by the length of the journey, pausing in silence before sighing again and reclining on his bunk. For the remainder of the day, he did not leave his bed, instead humming operatic verses, while Yang Dingyuan below absorbed the entirety of crossing 5 passes. The western terminus of the central route is Chita. That evening, the train arrived at the Manzhili station. Manzhili lies at the Chinese border. Further westward is Russian territory thus. The train was to halt for 2 days to await customs inspection. After being cooped up for so long, upon hearing of the 2-day layover, all the passengers disembarked to rest. Though Yang Dingyuan had nowhere to go, he too alighted. Stepping off the train, he was greeted by a landscape blanketed in thick, white snow, with a dense mist of breath forming a cloud above the crowd. He scooped up a handful of snow to wipe his face and surveyed his surroundings. Although Manzhili was within Chinese territory, it was administered by the Russians, and the station was bustling with many Russian merchants, most of whom spoke a smattering of Mandarin. As soon as the train passengers disembarked, they flocked to solicit business. They were aware that the Chinese typically had little money, and thus the throng was predominantly composed of Russians. Yang Dingyuan, surrounded by a cacophony of unintelligible Russian chatter, wandered aimlessly, devoid of funds, seeking merely to clear his mind. As a border town, Manzhili, though not particularly large, was remarkably vibrant, with bustling markets filled with shops offering furs, fish, meat, sugar, tea, and fabrics. In the bitter cold, the fish and meat were hung beneath the eaves, frozen solid, while the merchant calls were often interspersed with Russian phrases. If only he could master the Russian language, how advantageous it would be, Yang pondered as he approached a food stall. The shop offered tempting bread and sausages, and the proprietor was calling out in fluent Russian, his words flowing like a stream. Upon seeing Yang Dingyuan approach, the shopkeeper greeted him with a broad smile, switching to Mandarin. Esteemed guest, what would you like? Bread? Sausage? Everything is fresh, and a single bite is both fragrant and rich. Yang Dingyuan hesitated for a moment and inquired, Good sir, where did you learn to speak Russian? The shopkeeper chuckled. What is there to learn? Once you hear enough, it comes naturally. In Manzhuli. Russians are everywhere. If you stay for a year or so, you'll surely pick it up. Although there was some truth to this, it was ultimately an uninformative response. Just as Yang Dingyuan was about to ask another question, a voice called from behind. Is that you, Brother Yang? The voice was unfamiliar, and Yang Dingyuan was surprised that someone here recognized him. Turning around, he saw a man standing behind him, clad in coarse fabric, of modest height, but with a vibrant spirit. The man introduced himself. I share the surname Yang, but may I ask who you are? The little man smiled broadly, clasping his hands in greeting. Brother Yang, have you forgotten? I am Sang, from the same carriage. It turned out he was a fellow labor camp worker. Yang Dingyuan had not spoken much during the journey and did not recall this little man. But given his warm greeting, he returned the gesture with a clasped fist. Ah, Brother Sang. Just call me Little One. That's what everyone else calls me. Brother Yang, are you out for a stroll? In this biting cold, let us go drink together. Without waiting for Yang Dingyuan to respond, the little man purchased several large sausages from the shop and beckoned him to follow. As Yang Dingyuan took a couple of steps behind him, he was about to decline when the little man arrived at a tavern and, noticing Yang Dingyuan did not follow, turned back saying, Brother Yang, all men are brothers under heaven, come along. The little man's gaze had always been friendly, but now it suddenly sparkled with intensity, fixating intently on Yang Dingyuan. It was him. In an instant, Yang Dingyuan almost exclaimed. This was indeed the piercing gaze he had sensed on the train, and it was the little man who had been watching him intently. He immediately understood that this fellow, Sang, was not merely inviting him for a drink by coincidence. He had clearly harbored ulterior motives all along. If he resisted entering, he could only imagine what might transpire. Yang Dingyuan regarded him thoughtfully, feigning ignorance. Brother Sang, am not much of a drinker, perhaps it's not appropriate. The murderous intent in the little man's eyes lessened somewhat, replaced by a hint of mockery. Are you not a man? A man who cannot drink is hardly a man at all. Come inside, my older brother wishes to meet you. The little man opened the door, but did not enter, merely gesturing for Yang Dingyuan to go in first. It appeared that if Yang Dingyuan did not comply, he would not be allowed to leave. At this point, Yang Dingyuan found himself with no further options, and with a resolute heart, he thought, I have no enmity with him, he cannot possibly harm me. Bowing slightly, he stepped through the door to shield against the biting cold. A thin cotton quilt was hung at the entrance. Upon lifting the quilt, a wave of warmth surged forth outside. The world lay cloaked in ice and snow, while inside, the crowd rendered the atmosphere almost sweltering. The small-statured individual, noticing his arrival, guided him to a private room and, pushing open the door, said, Brother. Inside, a large Kong was occupied by 5 or 6 people. The small man approached the edge of the Kong, placed a large sausage on the table, and whispered, Brother, I went out to buy sausages and happened to run into Brother Yang, so I brought him along. A man sitting cross-legged at the edge of the Kong lifted his head and regarded Yang Dingyuan. The moment their eyes met, Yang Dingyuan felt a momentary unease. The man, not particularly tall and possessing a clean, refined appearance, had eyes that were as sharp as those of a hawk. If the small man's gaze was like 2 glaringly sharp daggers, this man's gaze was more akin to a needle concealed in cotton, harboring hidden depths. Upon seeing Yang Dingyuan, a hint of a smile graced his face as he beckoned. Brother Yang, come sit and have a drink. This homemade liquor is quite good. Yang Dingyuan hesitated slightly. Just as he approached, the small man gave him a pat on the back and thrust a bowl of liquor into his hands, exclaiming, Drink. Yang Dingyuan managed a wry smile and patted his pocket, saying, I left all my money at home. I don't have a single coin on me. The small man had insisted on bringing him in, and the air surrounding this group was cloaked in mystery, prompting Yang Dingyuan to clarify his situation to prevent unnecessary complications. The small man paused, then quickly laughed, truly a filial son. Just drink yours, I've made a friend in you. As he spoke, he produced a small knife from his waist and sliced the sausage into segments, piling them onto a large plate on the table. Yang Dingyuan held the liquor, pondering that refusing would be unwise. He raised the cup to his lips, only to be met with a potent aroma that rushed forth. The liquor from the Northeast is notoriously strong, and these taverns are known for brewing their own spirits while also offering lodging. With determination, he downed the drink, feeling as though a fiery line had been drawn straight into him. overwhelming in its intensity, almost igniting his insides, and tears immediately filled his eyes, nearly forcing him to cough. Laughter erupted among the people on the Kong, including the sharp-eyed man, who chuckled and said, "Brother Yang, this liquor is quite fierce, don't rush it. Here, have a piece of sausage to temper it." The sausage, filled with pork and fat, appeared cold, with visible clumps of white fat upon cutting. Yet, upon tasting, the flavor of the meat shone through, and the fiery burn of the liquor became less unbearable. As he chewed on the sausage, someone on the Kong made space for him, gently urging Yang Dingyuan to sit down, saying, "Take your time, brother." What intentions these individuals harbored remained unclear to Yang Dingyuan, yet they appeared unexpectedly jovial and devoid of hostility. He surveyed the surroundings and noticed, in a corner, the same man from the train who had engaged in gambling. This individual remained silent, merely consuming liquor and meat, displaying a sullen demeanor without acknowledging Yang Dingyuan. "Brother Yang, my surname is Een Chunshan." The sharp-eyed man introduced himself. The man with hawk-like eyes spoke softly. Though his voice was low, the moment he began to speak, silence enveloped the others, allowing his words to resonate clearly. Yang Dingyuan raised his gaze towards Een Chunshan and said, "A pleasure to meet you, Brother Een. You hail from Shandong and can read, correct?" Yang Dingyuan was momentarily taken aback. Een Chunshan seemed to sense his bewilderment and smiled. "I observed you penning a diary on the train. We are in need of someone literate. Would you be willing to assist us?" Yang Dingyuan was further astonished. So, their attention on him during the journey was for this purpose. The train was filled with laborers, and those who could even read were a rare find. Someone capable of keeping a diary was virtually unheard of. He replied, "May I inquire what you require of me, Brother Een?" Een Chunshan lifted his wine bowl and took a small sip, saying, "There are many matters to discuss, though I cannot reveal too much just yet. We, too, are heading to Russia in search of fortune, but it is prudent to band together in unfamiliar territory. Wouldn't you agree?" Noticing Yang Dingyuan nodding, he continued, "We are still in China, but we shall arrive in Russia by tomorrow. However, this vast expanse of land was originally ours, wrongfully seized by the Russian invaders. You are aware of this, I presume?" Yang Dingyuan nodded again. It was common knowledge that the Russians had occupied Chinese land. This had transpired merely decades ago. Een Chunshan added, "Brother Yang, if someone took your land, seized your home, and violated your sisters, would you not fight back?" Hearing this, Yang Dingyuan was taken aback. Although Een Chunshan's tone was calm, it betrayed a profound sense of indignation. No, he could not become entangled with such individuals. They were heading to Russia. Amidst a confluence of people, he wished to distance himself from any gang-related matters. Reflecting on this, Yang Dingyuan ceased nodding. Een Chunshan, perceiving his apprehension, raised his wine bowl and said, "Very well, it is our first meeting, and there is no need for coercion. However, what transpires today must remain confidential. Understood? Now let us drink this bowl." As another round of drinking was proposed, Yang Dingyuan hesitated, repeatedly shaking his head and smiling ruefully. "I must decline, Brother Een, as I am not adept at consuming alcohol." Een Chunshan smiled faintly. "Brother Yang, perhaps you are unaware of the customs. This bowl of wine serves as a seal. Should you refuse to drink, it implies you do not agree to my request." His earlier tone had been gentle, but now his gaze gleamed with the sharpness of a hawk. Despite the heat in the room, Yang Dingyuan felt a chill run down his spine. Just as he was about to grasp the wine bowl, a hand reached over and snatched it away. It belonged to a small-statured man, who rested his elbows on the table, presenting the bowl before his chest. Yang Dingyuan recalled tales from the elders and recognized that this was likely a rule of their underworld. Refusing to drink might mean he would not be permitted to leave today. Accepting the bowl, he gritted his teeth and downed the contents in one gulp, only to find the small man offering him a piece of meat pierced with a sharp knife, bringing it to his lips. The glinting knife was merely inches from his mouth. With a slight push, it could pierce Yang Dingyuan's throat entirely. Resolute, Yang opened his mouth and clamped down on the meat, yet the blade did not advance. Instead, it retreated. The small man patted him on the shoulder and said, "A true hero." However, the morsel of meat had ceased to suppress the alcohol's stench in his mouth. Yang felt his vision blurring when another approached him, saying, "Master Yang, I implore you to drink this bowl of wine." If he continued to be inundated with liquor, he feared he might not return home that night. Yang accepted the bowl and drained it in one gulp. Without waiting for the man to utter another word, he turned the bowl upside down on the table and declared, "Gentlemen, I shall take this favor upon myself today, and in the future, I shall repay it when the opportunity arises." The man seemed poised to speak again, but Een Chunshan interjected, Enough, let it be as such. Little fellow, escort Brother Yang back to the train. Why the haste? The tavern girls won't sprout hair. Yang reflected that the small man was likely eager to meet the tavern girls himself, and he surely would be reluctant to escort him. These individuals were shrouded in mystery, entangling himself further with them could lead to trouble. So he asserted, "No need, I can manage on my own." He was not accustomed to drinking, and the potent liquor he had consumed began to churn violently within him. While remaining still was tolerable, once he began to move, it felt as if a tempest raged in his stomach. He struggled to exit the door. Upon stepping outside, a gust of wind, laden with snow flurries, struck his face. The cold air was surprisingly refreshing. He bent down to scoop up some snow and rubbed it on his face. The searing pain from his flushed skin, upon contact with the snow, felt akin to myriad tiny daggers stabbing him, yet it alleviated the dizzying sensation somewhat. He steadied himself against the doorframe and glanced back. The door had closed. Inside, the cacophony had diminished significantly, though merely a door separated them. It felt as if he had traveled a great distance. Despite the warmth radiating from within, Yang felt as though he had just emerged from an ice cellar. Although Yin Chunshan did not appear to be a malevolent character, Yang sensed an unsettling dread in his presence. This seemingly genteel individual exuded an invisible authority, akin to a drawn sword, and even a mere glance elicited a palpable chill. Now, standing in the snow, he felt strangely more at ease than within. He staggered toward the station, the liquor in his belly continuing to wreak havoc. The journey, which had felt brief on the way there, now seemed to stretch infinitely. The wind intensified as dusk deepened over this northernmost expanse of China. The wind acted like an inhospitable host, delivering a stern warning to all newcomers. Yang Dingyuan staggered forward, gradually unable to discern the path ahead, overwhelmed by an expanse of white. The sky was dark, the ground a pale hue, each house was indistinguishable, cold and lifeless. What lay ahead in the future? Yin Chunshan and his companions were likely members of a gang, and Yang Dingyuan was uncertain of the repercussions that would follow his refusal of their overtures. Yet, for the moment, he had evaded disaster. As for tomorrow would confront it when it arrived. He merely pressed on, determined not to fall. The shops had all closed for the night. Should he collapse on the street, he would be unable to rise again, and thus, he would forfeit any hope of a tomorrow. Time passed unmeasured, the wind and snow intensifying, yet the bus station seemed to have vanished, leaving no trace behind. Just as despair threatened to engulf him, a voice emerged from the thickening twilight. "Brothers, battle-hardened on the front lines, today we joyfully reunite in the ancient city. My aspirations are extraordinary with unwavering resolve. I seek to make my name known. Upon my steed, the swift red hare, I shall conquer foes, with the blue dragon's crescent blade, cleaving through generals, relying on my chronicle of victories, 100 battles. One on the field, it was the voice of Hua Jingqi." This excerpt was from the tale of Guangong, typically sung with a resounding clarity, yet through the swirling snow, it echoed with a sense of ambition. However, Hua Jingqi's voice was sharp, piercing through the blizzard like a freshly extracted dagger, its raw intensity sending a shiver down Yang Dingyuan's spine. He lifted his gaze, following the sound, and in the snowy haze he spotted a few distant lights. The train had indeed been just ahead, obscured by the heavy snowfall, and most passengers had gone into the town, leaving only a few dim lights aboard. It was no wonder he had failed to notice it until now. Hua Jingqi's typically harsh voice, which one might find unpleasant, now struck a chord of desolation. Yang Dingyuan stumbled forward, reaching the train door, but his stiff fingers felt as rigid as iron, unable to bend. He could only muster the strength to knock twice. Inside, Hua Jingqi was soaking his feet. This was to be his final day in China. The carriage was otherwise deserted, and seizing the opportunity to indulge in drunken revelry, most had sought the company of courtesans for one last night, that he and the young eunuch remained behind, relishing the rare tranquility. With no one else aboard, there was ample hot water for foot soaks. Hua Jingqi was thoroughly enjoying himself, his throat itching as he belted out a verse from Shugamping for pleasure. Suddenly, a noise at the carriage door caught his attention. He frowned and said, "Little brat, go see if anyone else is returning." The young eunuch complied and approached the door. As he pulled it open, a gust of wind swept in, carrying the snow, and a figure suddenly burst into the carriage, startling the young eunuch. Upon closer inspection, he exclaimed, "Master Yang! It's Master Yang!" Hearing the commotion, Yang Dingyuan, with unwashed feet, dried them off and approached wearing straw sandals. As he drew near, A strong smell of alcohol assaulted his senses. He muttered, "This rascal can't hold his liquor yet drinks excessively. Returning in this weather it's reckless. Bring him in." Little Hu, the eunuch, reached out to drag Yang Dingyuan inside, but the latter, clad in heavy garments and towering over the diminutive eunuch, seemed as immovable as if he were welded to the ground. Impatience gnawed at Hu Jingqi, who forcefully pushed Little Hu aside, exclaiming, "You little brat, all that bread you devoured tonight was for naught. You lack even this bit of strength." That he bent down, grasped Yang Dingyuan by the collar, and with considerable effort, lifted him onto the vehicle, shouting, "Hurry and shut the door. This biting wind is no trifling matter." Little Hu promptly closed the door, but, seeing Yang Dingyuan still sprawled on the floor, expressed his concern. "Master, is Yang? Is he dead?" "Dead? How could he arrive here then?" "Stop your prattling and fetch some snow. He's merely drunk and has traversed quite a distance in this blizzard. The chill has seeped into his bones." Little Hu dared not argue, scurrying outside to gather snow, while Hu Jingqi unbuttoned Yang Dingyuan's clothing and vigorously rubbed snow against his chest. With considerable force, he soon noticed a flush of color returning to Yang Dingyuan's complexion, declaring, "That should do. Quickly, carry him to the bed and fetch a cup of hot water." Once the hot water was administered, Yang Dingyuan opened his eyes. Upon seeing him awake, Hu Jingqi sighed in relief, saying, "Yang, you've narrowly escaped death. How could you indulge in such folly, thinking the harsh winter outside resembles your homeland in Shandong?" Yang Dingyuan, reluctant to admit he had pushed himself to return to avoid lingering with Yin Chunshan and the others, propped himself up, saying, "Lord Hua, I am truly grateful. Spare me the formalities. The effects of the alcohol still linger. You should lie down early. Once the intoxication fades, you'll surely feel the cold more acutely." Hu Jingqi had intended to enjoy a peaceful rest, but Yang Dingyuan's return had disrupted his plans, causing him to feel slightly irritable. Noticing Hu Jingqi's displeasure, Yang Dingyuan refrained from further conversation, acknowledging that Hua had indeed saved his life. Seeing Little Hu still standing by, he added, "Little Hu, I'm fine now. You should also take a rest." Little Hu, accustomed to Hu Jingqi's commands, replied, "Yes, Master Yang, if you need anything, just call for me." Yang Dingyuan adjusted his blanket. With no one else in the carriage, Hu Jingqi had moved the stove beside the bed, where a pot of water simmered, steam rising from the spout. As Yang Dingyuan lay there, somewhat dazed, his gaze fell upon an oil lamp hanging from the carriage's ceiling, and an overwhelming sense of emptiness washed over him. The road ahead is still long, and the days stretch out before us. Yet, what will the future truly hold? He pondered in confusion, but the voice of Hu Jingqi singing echoed in his ears, sighing for the chaos of the world. The 10 eunuchs of the Han dynasty have led the nation astray. With their usurpation of power, they conspire against the virtuous, leaving the common people in despair. Every household suffers from scarcity, while relentless drought brings calamity upon the masses. When shall we ever see a year of peace? The voice gradually faded. Outside the train, the wind blew fiercely, slipping through the cracks like a sharp blade, and Hu Jingqi's voice diminished further until it was finally replaced by the sound of snoring. The train departed from Mansfield, jolting along for over 10 days. The journey traversed desolate mountains and dense forests, with only the occasional stop revealing the presence of inhabitants. These stops were mere small stations, home to at most a dozen households, where passengers boarded to deliver coal and water. Although this territory belonged to Russia, the individuals boarding the train were predominantly Chinese. During this time, Yang Dingyuan had not encountered Yin Chunshan. The little fellow sometimes came to engage him in conversation, seemingly having forgotten the hostility displayed when he forced him to drink sealing wine in the furnace that day. The little one mentioned that the terminus of the Middle East Railway, Chita, was not far ahead. Chita lies not far from Lake Baikal, an area that once belonged to China, where Su Wu shepherded sheep. Yang Dingyuan, upon hearing the little one's detailed account, exclaimed, "So this is the ancient record of the North Sea." "North Sea?" The little fellow was taken aback. Yang Dingyuan continued, "Doesn't Master Sang know?" The little one chuckled sheepishly, replying, "Do not call me Master Sang, just refer to me as the little one. I can hardly recognize characters as large as a watermelon. I've only heard my elder brother mention that this place was originally part of China, and it was referred to as the North Sea in ancient times. The elder brother he referred to was, of course, Yin Chunshan. Initially, Yang Dingyuan believed that Hu Jingqi was literate, but after spending days together on the train, he realized that Hu was merely a blind man with his eyes wide open. Any classical knowledge he possessed was likely derived from listening to operas. While the little fellow had acquired his knowledge from Yin Chunshan, he smiled and remarked, "Indeed, The Xingguobao from Fengshenyanyu is also trapped within the North Sea. Upon mentioning Fengshenyanyu, the little fellow became animated. Ah, so it's right here. Is that crooked-necked one still inside? This was mere banter, lacking any truth. The little one sighed, perhaps lamenting the absence of Xingguobao. As they conversed, Hu Jingqi leapt from the train. Not recognizing the little one, he spotted Yang Dingyuan and exclaimed, Master Yang, you are here enjoying the breeze as well. Yang Dingyuan replied, Indeed, Master Hua. The train is about to depart. Are you getting off? I've been cooped up in the train these past days, feeling quite stifled. I need to stretch my limbs, Hu Jingqi responded, jumping off the train and striking a pose to begin practicing his martial arts. Yang Dingyuan, hailing from Shandong, a region known for its martial prowess, had dabbled in martial arts during his youth, yet never seriously trained. Observing Hu Jingqi darting across the snowy ground with agile movements, he thought to himself that although one might claim to be unskilled, his proficiency seemed formidable enough to deter 2 or 3 opponents. While he found the display entertaining, he noticed the little fellow snorting derisively from the side, clearly unimpressed. As a member of such a gang, it was likely that the little one had also practiced martial arts. Hu Jingqi had mentioned that his skills were learned from palace instructors, which the little one viewed as unsophisticated and unworthy of respect. Yang Dingyuan found this amusing, reflecting on the truth of the saying that colleagues often belittle one another. Despite Hu Jingqi being a eunuch and the little one being a gang member, they were hardly peers, merely both possessing a modicum of martial skill. After several days of travel, the train finally arrived in Chita. The eastern route concluded here, and the laborers aboard were destined for Irkutsk, requiring several more days of travel from Chita. Due to a change in the locomotive, the train halted for a day. Chita is a significant station. Although there are many Chinese individuals, it is undeniably part of Russian territory. Throughout their journey thus far, they could utilize the silver dollar, but beyond Chita, it could only be spent in Chinese-run shops, necessitating a conversion to rubles. Consequently, many exchanged their silver dollars for rubles. Yang Dingyuan, being penniless, disembarked alongside Hu Jingqi and the young eunuch, Xiaohua. Hu Jingqi observed the surroundings, making casual critiques. He either lamented the low height of one building or the dilapidated condition of another, invariably comparing everything unfavorably to the grandeur of the palace. In his mind, the forbidden city, which he could no longer return to, epitomized paradise on earth. Yang Dingyuan, aware of his temperament, merely offered perfunctory responses. As the trio ambled along, Xiaohua suddenly exclaimed, Master, there are street vendors here as well. Along the street ahead, numerous vendors set up stalls, including some tall-nosed, deep-eyed Russians. Hu Jingqi, with keen eyes, hastened forward. Yang Dingyuan, unsure of what had caught his attention, hurried after him, only to find Hu Jingqi standing before a stall, toying with a short sword displayed atop it. The sword measured merely a hand's breadth in length and bore intricate patterns on its blade, exuding a sense of delicacy. Yang Dingyuan remarked, Master Hua, this appears to be a Chinese item. Hu Jingqi tossed the short sword into the air without fear of injury, catching it deftly, and inquired, How much is this? The vendor, an elderly Chinese man, responded with a few phrases in an unfamiliar dialect, leaving Hu Jingqi bewildered. He turned to Yang Dingyuan, asking, Can you understand him? Yang Dingyuan shook his head, replying, I cannot comprehend either. The old man, realizing their confusion, articulated a string of Russian, which left them even more perplexed. Observing their lack of understanding, the elder gestured with a hand and produced a silver dollar from his pocket, indicating a price of 5 silver dollars. Hu Jingqi clicked his tongue, exclaiming, 5 silver dollars? How exorbitant! Yet, despite his protest, he clutched the short sword, unwilling to relinquish it. Yang Dingyuan advised, Master Hua, if you find it too expensive, do not purchase it. That small sword has little practical use for you. Hu Jingqi shot him a disdainful glance, retorting, Yang, you simply lack insight. This was once a gift from the emperor to his concubines, and it has likely fallen into this place after being seized by the Russians during the Boxer Rebellion. Just try it. The blade is remarkably sharp. He proceeded to test the sword against his nail, and indeed, the short sword proved exceptionally keen, slicing through his nail effortlessly. Surprised by its sharpness, Hu Jingqi gritted his teeth, sheathed the sword hastily, and tossed 5 silver dollars onto the stall, seemingly anxious that the old man might reconsider, before turning on his heel and departing. He had acquired something he was quite fond of, and saw no reason to continue shopping. As a result, Yang Dingyuan and the young eunuch, Xiaohua, had no choice but to accompany him back to the carriage. Upon their arrival, most of the passengers had not yet returned. Hu Jingqi, holding the short sword, gazed at it with reluctance to set it down. He asked the young eunuch to fetch him a cup of water, and then he took out the large loaf of bread distributed on the train, slicing it into pieces to eat. This bread was issued daily to the laborers as rations. The Russian bread was dense and, once dried, as hard as a brick, requiring one to break it apart with their hands to avoid the crumbs. Hua Jingqi attempted to slice it with the short sword, and to his delight, he managed to make clean cuts, rendering the dry bread surprisingly palatable. As he reveled in his small pleasure, a train attendant approached, leading a small child, who pointed to the side and uttered a phrase in Russian. The child nodded in response, dragging a burlap sack over, and dumped its contents into a corner, pieces of coal. The train was exceedingly cold. Hence each carriage was equipped with a stove, and the child was evidently delivering coal. After emptying the sack, he hoisted another onto his back and called out, "Sunflower cakes." "Sunflower cakes for sale?" Yang Dingyuan observed that the child was covered in soot, particularly his hands, which were so blackened that his original color was indiscernible. However, his eyes shone bright and dark, and the hair peeking from beneath his large hat was also black, leading Yang Dingyuan to surmise he was likely Chinese. The Russians, in their endeavors, had conscripted 1 million Chinese laborers. The Middle East route traversed the Siberian wilderness, where the permafrost was ancient and unyielding. During winter, temperatures sometimes plummeted below -50 degrees, resulting in countless Chinese laborers succumbing to the cold or exhaustion. Once the railway was completed, many Chinese laborers found themselves stranded in a foreign land, with some marrying and settling down there, likely making this child a descendant of that group. Although he initially spoke in Chinese, his fluency paled in comparison to his earlier exchange in Russian with the attendant. Had Siwa forgotten to take his belongings? Yang Dingyuan approached, curious to investigate, but upon touching the sack, he was taken aback. The sack shifted slightly. Startled, he yanked open the top. As he did, he nearly cried out. Revealed within was a small, coal-dusted face filled with terror. It was Siwa. He had been hiding inside, and upon being discovered, his eyes widened in fear. Yet upon recognizing Yang Dingyuan, they quickly shifted to a pleading gaze, silently imploring him to remain silent. Yang Dingyuan glanced around to ensure no one was watching, then leaned closer and whispered, "Why are you still on the train?" Seeing that Yang Dingyuan did not appear inclined to shout, Sihua steadied himself and replied softly, "Elder brother, please don't alert anyone. I need to go to Irkutsk, and once I arrive, I will disembark without anyone noticing." Concealed within the burlap sack, his petite frame was nearly undetectable, easily mistaken for a pile of old clothes. He sighed quietly. "It will take several days to reach Irkutsk. How will you manage?" "I have rye bread and sunflower cakes. Inside here, I don't feel cold at all." At present, he likely does not feel the chill, yet as night falls, Yang Dingyuan, even wrapped in a quilt, finds himself shivering. The wind seeps through the cracks in the corridor, and if a cup of water is placed here, it will freeze in no time. If Sihua remains here, she would surely succumb to the cold. As Yang Dingyuan pondered, he noticed the old conductor approaching from the far end of the carriage. He quickly covered the sack's opening, feigning an act of tidying up. The old conductor, upon seeing him, greeted, "Young man, aren't you off to bed yet?" "I still cannot sleep. I shall linger a while longer. It's cold, and the carriage is warmer. Here, one could freeze to death." They exchanged a few casual remarks before the old conductor, clutching a ticket folder, proceeded towards the rear of the train. Once he departed, Yang Dingyuan reopened the sack and whispered, "Come out." Sihua, reassured by Yang Dingyuan's discretion, cautiously peeked out. At that moment, most people were busy eating on their bunks, while a group of gamblers had gathered around an individual from Anhui, leaving the corridor deserted. Sihua shook her head, saying, "Brother, if someone spots me, I shall be thrown off the train immediately. Haven't you heard it will be quite frigid tonight? You would surely perish here." Yang Dingyuan paused and inquired, "What brings you to Irkutsk?" "I have heard that my grandfather is there. I must seek him out." "Why didn't you search for him before?" "My grandfather has always been on the move, without a fixed place. I only recently learned he is in Irkutsk. If I do not hurry, he may leave again." Upon seeing Siwa's pitiful expression, Yang Dingyuan contemplated for a moment and softly said, "Very well, I shall devise a plan. You stay here and remain silent." Sihua nodded in agreement. Yang Dingyuan loosely tied the sack's opening with a knot and whispered, "Wait for me to return." The journey to Irkutsk would take several days. Concealing a living person for such a duration would be no easy feat, especially with 50 laborers in this single carriage alone. Fortunately, Siwa was petite, and as she slept in the corner of the carriage, if they nestled together on a bunk and exercised caution, they might indeed evade detection. However, it was certain that the upper bunk's occupant, Hua Jingqi, would not be so easily deceived. He would have to be persuaded. Remembering how Hua Jingqi had previously taken 2 sunflower cakes from Siwa without compensation, Yang Dingyuan felt a twinge of hesitation. Most of the passengers had finished their meals, and some had begun gambling again. Yang Dingyuan returned to his bunk, where Hua Jingqi was comfortably lounging above, munching on sunflower seeds and humming a tune. In the peach garden, heroes gather. A banquet is held to celebrate the brave. Tomorrow, we shall enlist to serve. On the battlefield, we shall earn our merit. Yang Dingyuan chuckled. Hua, you are in high spirits. Hua Jingqi paused his snacking and replied with a grin. Just humming a few lines. Yang, you've returned from your stroll? Yang Dingyuan nodded, hesitated briefly, and then asked, Hua, may I inquire if the song you were singing is the Oath of the Peach Garden? Hua Jingqi remarked, indeed. The bond of brotherhood in the Peach Garden among Lu, Guan, and Zhang is truly remarkable. If only I, Hua Jingqi, could have been born a few thousand years earlier. I would undoubtedly join the Peach Garden for a quartet of brotherhood. Today, dear Yang, you would hear the tale of the four brothers of the Peach Garden, Lu, Guan, Zhang, and Hua. Haha. Yang Dingyuan thought to himself, your mind is filled with the Peach Garden brotherhood, yet you are but a eunuch. In that era, Lu and Zhang would hardly have had a place for you. It is far more likely that you would have served as a minor eunuch under the 10 attendants. He replied, indeed, the brotherhood of Lu, Guan, and Zhang is commendable. Consider Lu Xuanda, noble and righteous. It is no wonder that Guan and Zhang would risk their lives for him. Hua Jingqi continued, precisely. Otherwise, why would Liu Bei have disregarded the counsel of Master Kongming, rallying an army to seek vengeance against Eastern Wu for Lord Guan? He then inquired, Yang, do you partake of sunflower seeds? Upon mentioning the Three Kingdoms drama, his enthusiasm surged, and he reached for the half-eaten sunflower cake to offer it. Yang Dingyuan shook his head and replied, no, thank you, Hua. Is there not a play about the birth of Lord Guan? Hua Jingqi asked. Indeed, it is slaying the bear and tiger. The prefect of Puzhou, Xionghu, tyrannized the people, abducting the maiden Zhang Wanjiao. Unable to bear the injustice, Lord Guan, in a fit of rage, slew the entire Xiong family and subsequently wandered the rivers and lakes, forming the brotherhood in the Peach Garden and achieving great deeds. Have you not heard of it, Yang? Allow me to recite a couplet. Hua Jingqi became animated, clearing his throat and launching into song. Curse the corrupt officials who extort and oppress, seizing lands and robbing innocents, boldly abducting maidens. Today, I shall rid the people of their woes, slaying the bear and tiger, for the calamity is great. Ah, the pure spring water, how it changes one's visage. Guided by the divine power of the Holy Mother, I, alas, shall rush to Finyang to offer my service at the army's front. As he sang with gusto, he struck a pose on the low stage, but the height betrayed him. As he pressed down, he stumbled, yet he relished the performance once he regained his stance. His singing was indeed vigorous, though his high-pitched voice lacked sweetness. Yang Dingyuan felt a chuckle rising within, but restrained himself, nodding in agreement. Hua, your singing is truly commendable. Emboldened by the praise, Hua Jingqi grinned, scratching the itch of his vanity. The space here is limited. I'm not boasting, Yang. If I were to take the stage, I would surely outshine Wang Sanmatzi. Wang Sanmatzi, known as Wang Hongshou, was renowned for his portrayal of Guangdong and was referred to as the living Guangdong. He had made a splash in Shanghai before heading north in 1908, captivating audiences. Hua Jingqi adored Guangdong operas and never missed a performance of Wang Sanmatzi, convinced that his own singing was on par with the esteemed actor. Yang Dingyuan, unfamiliar with Peking opera and unaware of Wang Sanmatzi's reputation, recognized him as a celebrated performer and echoed, indeed, indeed. Hua, please have a seat. May I share a few words with you? Yang Dingyuan inquired. Feeling a sense of kinship with Yang, Hua Jingqi, though unaware of Yang's intentions, eagerly replied, please, speak, Yang. Yang Dingyuan pondered briefly before speaking softly. Hua, I have heard from the elders that saving a life is worth more than building a 7-story pagoda. Is that not so? Hua Jingqi nodded repeatedly. Indeed, indeed. Lord Guan was always warm-hearted and compassionate, always coming to the aid of those in distress. Otherwise, he would not have been revered in the palace. Part 2. An isolated child from a foreign land. To his astonishment, there were sunflower cakes for sale in this place. Hua Jingqi, who was munching on dry bread, perked up at the mention. He leaned out from his spot and inquired, young lad, do you sell sunflower cakes? How much do they cost? The child, noticing a potential customer, hurried over and replied, 10 cents each. 10 cents? With that amount, one could purchase a large loaf of bread. What makes your sunflower cake so exorbitant? Hua Jingqi's tone was laced with sarcasm, yet the child took him seriously, responding, they are grown on the mountain. Are they fragrant? Indeed. If they aren't fragrant, there is no charge. The child's Mandarin was somewhat halting. Yet this phrase rolled off his tongue with fluency, likely a line he repeated each time he came to sell sunflower cakes at the train station. Hua Jingqi extended his hand and said, then I'll take 2. The child unfastened a burlap sack from his shoulder and opened it, stating, you can take them yourself. My hands are dirty. Indeed, the child's hands were quite soiled. Hua Jingqi, undeterred, reached into the sack and retrieved 2 sizable sunflower cakes. each nearly the size of a small basin. He picked one up and tossed a sunflower seed into his mouth. Roasted sunflower seeds are rich and oily, but when eaten raw, they possess a flavor reminiscent of water chestnuts, especially after gnawing on the dry bread. Chewing on these raw seeds released a delightful crunch and abundant juice, which was particularly delectable. Ho Jingqi cracked the seeds with remarkable efficiency, one hand holding the sunflower cake, while the other plucked a seed to pop into his mouth, swiftly consuming the kernel and discarding the shell into his palm. A habit likely cultivated in the palace, with his pinky raised. In a brief span, he had amassed a handful of sunflower seed shells. The child, witnessing his enjoyment, extended his hand and said, "Sir, that will be 20 cents. Ho Jingqi, still cracking seeds, shot him an incredulous look. "You want money? This sunflower cake is far from fragrant. It's stale." The child was taken aback, momentarily stunned, and then hurriedly burst forth with a string of Russian words. Though their meaning was lost on him, Ho Jingqi, growing impatient, replied, "Enough of that babble. I don't understand your words. You said yourself that if it's not fragrant, there's no charge." With that, he resumed his seed cracking, dismissing the child entirely. Yang Dingyuan observed him reclining on the bed, his legs propped up, clearly reluctant to pay. He thought to himself, "You spent $5 on a short sword without a flinch, yet you hesitate over a mere 20 cents for the child." Noticing the child's eyes welling with tears, he beckoned, "Come here, young one. He is just teasing you." The child approached, and Yang Dingyuan retrieved a loaf of bread from the bedside, saying, "2 sunflower cakes and 1 loaf of bread, correct? This large loaf costs 20 cents, just like the ones issued daily at the labor camp." Although Yang Dingyuan had a hearty appetite, the dry, hard bread was not easy to consume in large quantities. Over the past few days, he had accumulated 3 loaves, which he kept at the bedside, reasoning that in the cold, they would not spoil and could serve as provisions later. The child nodded, and Yang Dingyuan handed him 1 loaf, saying, "Here you go." Watching the child place the large loaf into his sack, he asked, "What is your name, young lad?" The child looked up and replied, "Sihua." This is entirely a Chinese name. Yang Dingyuan glanced at the child. Although his face was covered in soot, his bright, lively eyes sparkled with intelligence. Yet, despite his tender age, Yang Dingyuan discerned a hint of melancholia in his gaze that seemed incongruous with his years. He smiled and affectionately tousled the child's hair, inquiring, "What is your surname?" The child's hat was oversized, and the strap hung loose. As Yang Dingyuan's hand brushed against his hat, it nearly slipped off, revealing a portion of his braid. Suddenly, the child pressed down on his hat, a fleeting look of fear flashing in his eyes. He adjusted the hat and secured the strap, replying, "I don't know." "Don't know?" "Yes. My parents are both gone." Siwa glanced around and asked, "Is the train headed to Irkutsk?" "Yes." "Do you live here all the time?" Just as Siwa was about to respond, a ticket inspector approached. He was an older Chinese man, and upon seeing Siwa, he exclaimed, "The train is about to depart. Why haven't you disembarked? If the conductor sees you, he might strike you." Though covered in a layer of coal dust, a flicker of panic crossed Siwa's face. He no longer sold sunflower cakes, slung the sack back over his shoulder, and hurriedly jumped off the train, striding away. The old inspector watched Sihua's retreating figure, sighed, and said nothing further. Yang Dingyuan observed the diminutive silhouette as it descended from the train, disappearing in an instant, leaving him with a tumult of emotions. For reasons unknown, he faintly perceived a reflection of himself in this child. Like Sihua, Yang Dingyuan had embarked on the journey of survival at a young age. Yet his parents were still alive. He could hardly fathom how such a young boy could manage to subsist alone in the distant city of Chita. Strangely, his parents likely remained oblivious to the fact that China had undergone a regime change years ago, with the populace having long since abandoned their braids. He rose and approached the inspector. "Old brother, do you recognize that child?" "How could I not?" Alas, the old inspector shook his head. What a wretched fate. His father came to work on the railway long ago and managed to survive, but he was left with a multitude of ailments. He later married a Mongolian woman, and shortly after having a child, they both perished. This boy, at 15, has been scraping by at the station for food, and I cannot fathom how he endures this life. 15? Yang Dingyuan had thought he appeared no older than 11 or 12. Reflecting on his own impoverished circumstances, he realized they were still infinitely better than Sihua's plight, which cast a shadow over his heart. At that moment, the train had switched engines and began to sound its whistle as passengers gradually returned. The old inspector, seeing everyone had arrived, hurried off to attend to his duties, while Yang Dingyuan felt a sudden heaviness in his chest, not merely due to the throng of people in the compartment, but rather an indescribable sense of unease. Worried for Siwa, he rose from his seat and made his way to the train door. A few Russians strolled along the platform, occasionally glancing up to regard the faces of the Easterners within the train. their expressions rife with disdain and contempt. In their eyes, the Chinese on this carriage were little more than livestock, yet that small figure had vanished from view. Yang Dingyuan let out a sigh. He, too, was in a precarious situation, so why should he concern himself with the troubles of others? Yet, there was something weighing heavily on his heart. An inexplicable burden that he could not cast aside. At that moment, the train emitted a deafening roar and began to depart slowly, leaving Chita. The journey would involve many mountainous paths. Now, the train was equipped with a locomotive at both the front and rear, one pulling and the other pushing, thus moving with greater speed than before. Just as Yang Dingyuan was about to return to his seat, he caught sight of a large burlap sack amidst the luggage in the aisle. The compartments were filled with Chinese laborers recruited from labor camps. Despite their impoverished circumstances, many possessed some belongings, especially given the frigid climate they were heading towards, necessitating changes of clothing, woolen shoes, and hats. The overcrowded compartments left little room for these items, forcing them to be piled in the narrow passageway between two carriages. The doors in this area were rarely opened, rendering it a makeshift storage space, overflowing with various items. Among them, one large burlap sack unmistakably belonged to the young woman he had seen earlier, with several incomprehensible Russian characters inscribed upon it. And its opening was not securely tied. Yang Dingyuan thought to himself how simple it would be if matters were as straightforward as that. He glanced around. Some passengers were resting with their eyes closed, while others were engrossed in a fervent gambling game, paying no mind to him and his companion. He addressed Mr. Hua. Could we have a moment to speak privately? Hua Jingqi appeared momentarily taken aback, contemplating what Yang Dingyuan might wish to discuss. Did he desire that hidden dagger? For a fleeting second, he nearly offered it to him, but hesitated, unable to part with it, leaving him in a state of unease. Following Yang Dingyuan into the aisle, he said, Mr. Yang, if you are in any trouble, please speak freely. I, Hua Jingqi, will certainly assist you in any way I can. Noticing that they were alone, Yang Dingyuan lowered his voice. Mr. Hua, there is someone in dire straits. Could you lend him a hand? A smile crept onto Hua Jingqi's face. Mr. Yang. It seems you are in a bit of a bind. Is that not so? Well, I might also be in a predicament, but I still have a few silver coins on hand. Allow me to lend you 2 for now. As he spoke, he reached for his money. Realizing Hua had misunderstood, Yang hurriedly clarified, Mr. Hua, you are mistaken. I am not referring to myself. Do you recall the young boy who came earlier to sell sunflower cakes? Hua Jingqi's hand froze, his expression shifting to one of suspicion as he looked at Yang Dingyuan. Mr. Yang, are you blaming me for taking advantage of that child for 2 sunflower cakes? To be honest, it was clear that the boy was no upstanding individual. No, Mr. Hua, the child wishes to travel to Irkutsk, but he has no money, so he secretly boarded the train. I was thinking. Yang Dingyuan paused, steeling himself. Mr. Hua, I've hidden him away. Once we reach Irkutsk, he will disembark. I kindly ask for your assistance in covering for him during these 2 days. Would that be possible? Hua Jingqi was momentarily stunned. He had not anticipated that Yang Dingyuan was referring to this matter. After a brief glance around, he inquired, Where is this little rascal? Have you concealed him? Yang Dingyuan gestured toward the large burlap sack. Mr. Hua, do you recall this sack? Hua Jingqi glanced at the large sack, feeling somewhat perplexed. He approached and opened the sack's mouth, upon seeing Sihua hiding inside. He quickly secured the opening and returned to Yang Dingyuan's side, whispering, Master Yang, this matter of yours is rather dubious. Noticing a hint of hesitation in Hua's tone, Yang Dingyuan promptly inquired, how would Lord Guan handle such a situation? Hua Jingqi replied, Do not provoke me. Let me ponder this. He furrowed his brow in contemplation. Just as Yang Dingyuan began to worry that Hua would outright refuse, Hua suddenly declared, Very well. Saving a life is worth more than building a 7-tiered pagoda. Master Yang, let him sleep on my bunk. Yang Dingyuan was taken aback. And what about you, Master Hua? I shall switch bunks with the little rascal. They are both small. They can fit on one bed. Furthermore, let him don the little rascal's attire and only descend from the bunk at night. For the next few days. I believe I can keep this under wraps. Yang Dingyuan thought this was indeed a clever plan. The diminutive figure of the little eunuch would likely go unnoticed, especially since these 2 carriages were reserved for laborers, and the train staff would not come to check tickets. Sihua could remain hidden during the day and only come out at night, and since he would be dressed as the little eunuch, most would hardly suspect anything. He nodded and said, Thank you, Master Hua. Between us, there is no need for such formalities. Little brother, seeing you are a few years my junior, I shall address you as such. Seeing Hua about to revert to his familiar ways, Yang Dingyuan thought to flatter him further to ensure he would not change his mind, saying, Brother Hua. As he bent slightly, Hua Jingqi hurriedly interjected, No need for such grand gestures, little brother. His words left Yang Dingyuan somewhat at a loss. He had not intended to perform any grand gesture, Yet since Hua had preempted him, he simply bowed deeply and said, "I am grateful to you, brother Hua. You truly embody the spirit of a hero, a remarkable figure, comparable to Lord Guan." Hua Jingqi, flattered by his praise, could hardly contain his delight, replying, "I dare not compare myself." After a moment, he added quietly, "It is still light outside. Once everyone has retired for the night, bring this little rascal over. I will ensure everything is in order with the little bunny." Yang Dingyuan replied, "Very well. I appreciate your assistance, brother Hua." Yet inwardly, he felt a twinge of irony. Before reaching their destination, he had already acknowledged a eunuch as an elder brother. Who would believe such a tale? Nonetheless, it was a relief that Hua Jingqi was willing to help. Once Hua departed, he approached the sack and whispered, "Sihua, did you hear that? Stay put and remain quiet." He returned to his bunk to find the little eunuch tidying up his belongings. Though it was merely a bundle of clothing, the little eunuch, fearing the cold, had covered himself with thick garments at night and was now moving them to Hua Jingqi's bunk. Upon seeing Yang Dingyuan return, the little eunuch paused and greeted him. "Master Yang." Yang Dingyuan said nothing, merely nodded to him and lay down on the bed. Hua Jingqi had also brought down his belongings and now lay in bed, humming an opera tune. The train continued its relentless journey forward, the light seeping in through the gaps growing dimmer. The gamblers had dispersed, each returning to their respective quarters to rest. However, young Dingyuan found himself unable to sleep, lying there fully clothed, lost in thought. Why should he help Sihua? He could not articulate a reason. Perhaps it was the ancient saying of shared suffering. He too was far from home, wandering alone in a foreign land. And this child's plight seemed even more tragic than his own. This thought made him chuckle softly, mocking himself for pretending to be a hero while he was merely absorbed in his own troubles. The train clattered noisily along the tracks, and to Yang Dingyuan's ears, the sound seemed to whisper, "Go back, go back." Yet he understood that there was no turning back for him. He could only move forward. What lay ahead? He did not know, but like the train, he realized he had but one path to tread. Perhaps, many years hence, when he reflected on this day, he would feel a different sentiment? Lost in his reverie, he eventually drifted into a light slumber. He could not tell how long he had slept when he felt a gentle tap on his shoulder. Startled, he opened his eyes and lifted his head to see Hua Jingqi bending over beside his bunk. Noticing he was awake, Hua Jingqi whispered, "Brother, bring that little imp over." Yang Dingyuan sat up. Now the night had deepened. A single oil lamp flickered in the carriage, swaying like the eye of a weary sleeper as the train moved. "All right, brother Hua, is everything arranged here? All set. Quickly call the little imp over, but do not wake anyone." Hua Jingqi held a set of old clothes belonging to little Hua, and Yang Dingyuan took them, standing up, putting on his shoes, and carefully walking over. The carriage was filled with the rhythmic sound of snores, creating a thick haze in the air. He reached the front of the carriage, pushed open the door, and a gust of cold wind rushed in. Although the carriage was cold, the presence of 50 men warmed it somewhat. The chill in the passageway, however, pierced like a steel needle, sending a shiver down Yang Dingyuan's spine. He stepped inside, closed the door, and approached the large burlap sack, speaking softly, "Sihua, come out." The sack opened, and Sihua's had emerged. He hadn't anticipated it would be so cold, and wrapped in the sack, he was still shivering. Yang Dingyuan handed him the clothes and whispered, "Change into these, then share a bunk with little Hua. Remember, do not come down during the day. Wait until others are asleep before you come out." Though the passage was dim, Yang Dingyuan could see the glimmer of tears in Sihua's eyes. He took the clothes and softly said, "Thank you, brother Yang. Do not linger, hurry." As Sihua crawled out of the burlap sack, he was about to unfasten his dirty clothes when his face suddenly flushed. "Brother Yang, could you turn your back?" Yang Dingyuan felt a mix of anger and amusement. "Are you truly concerned about your appearance? Hurry up." He turned away as Sihua spoke. Her clothing was tattered and worn, covered in coal dust. After a moment, he heard a rustling sound behind him and thought she must have finished changing. He pulled out a handkerchief and turned to say, "Here, wipe yourself." But as he turned, his face flushed crimson. The corridor was dimly lit, yet there was a faint glimmer of light filtering through. In that muted illumination, Sihua was fastening her buttons, her chest partially exposed, glistening pale and radiant, reminiscent of a young girl just blossoming into womanhood. Upon seeing Yang Dingyuan turn, Sihua gasped and quickly covered herself, her cheeks tinged with red. Flustered, Yang Dingyuan hastily faced away and murmured, "Hurry up." He was utterly unprepared for the revelation that Sihua was a girl. Earlier, with her face smeared in coal dust, appearing grimy and her voice rather sharp, he had taken her for a young boy. This was the first time he had glimpsed a girl's form, and despite averting his gaze, he felt warmth cascading over his cheeks, suddenly understanding why she wore her hair in braids. After a moment, Sihua quietly said, "Yang Ji, I'm done." Yang Dingyuan turned back to find Shihua now dressed. In the dim light, her figure bore a striking resemblance to that of a young eunuch. If one were not to pay close attention, she could easily be mistaken for one. He offered her the handkerchief, saying, "Wipe your face." Shihua's face still bore a hint of red as she took the handkerchief and wiped her face hastily. As the coal dust cleared, the corridor seemed to brighten, causing Yang Dingyuan to feel a wave of dizziness, accompanied by a deepening ache in his heart. At her age, she should have been at home engaged in needlework. And he couldn't fathom how she had survived alone in a foreign land for so many years. He whispered, "You're a girl?" Shihua lowered her head. Her ears slightly flushed, replying, "Yes, but don't tell anyone." Yang Dingyuan thought of the little ones back in Manzhouli, where they would rush to find a brothel after a night of drinking. He couldn't imagine what they would do if they knew a girl was with them in the car. Yet, upon remembering that both Hu Jingqi and Xiaowu were eunuchs, he couldn't help but chuckle softly. It seemed fate had conspired to ensure Shihua's survival in this world. "I've already spoken to Master Hua. You'll share a bed with Xiaohua," he said, pausing before adding softly, "Don't worry, they are both good men." "What do you mean by good men?" Shihua asked, her eyes wide, clearly unaware of the term. Yang Dingyuan hesitated to clarify, opting instead for vague reassurance. "It means kind-hearted people." Shihua nodded, only half comprehending. Yang Dingyuan then said, "Let us go." As Shihua prepared to follow, she suddenly remarked, "Yang Ji, thank you. I truly don't know how to repay you. Let us not discuss that now. We can talk about it when we reach our destination." Yang Dingyuan led Sihua back to the carriage. Inside, most passengers were fast asleep, and those who were awake paid little heed to the two who passed by. Without uttering a word, Yang guided Sihua to his bunk, gesturing for her to climb up. The young eunuch, Xiaohua, had already awakened, and Yang instructed Sihua to nestle at his feet before he lay down on his own bed. At least one hurdle had been crossed. However, disembarking might pose some difficulties. Yet, Yang felt no urgency. With so many people crammed into the carriage, chaos was inevitable during disembarkation, and Sihua would likely slip away unnoticed in the turmoil. Strangely, once he lay down, sleep eluded him. His mind was plagued by visions of the fair bosom he had glimpsed earlier. Damn it, how utterly indecent. He chastised himself inwardly. Sihua was merely a young girl. Did he truly wish to take advantage of her vulnerability? As he scolded himself, he silently recited the three-character classic he had learned in school. Human nature at birth is inherently good, hoping to remind himself to avoid such impure thoughts. Yet, a lingering worry gnawed at him. Could a little girl truly find her grandfather? This thought cast a shadow over him, filling him with sorrow. Perhaps it was merely her unrealistic fantasy, but regardless, he had saved her for the moment, and the future could be addressed in due time. Lost in such thoughts, he unknowingly drifted into slumber. Yang Dingyuan had initially believed that hiding someone in the carriage would be a daunting task, difficult to evade the notice of others. However, the reality proved far more favorable than he had anticipated. The carriage was filled with impoverished men who had fled their hometowns in search of a better life abroad, each lost in a haze of confusion and anxiety. Some gambled their days away, while others remained sullen, consumed by their own thoughts. On the train, everyone was preoccupied with their own little world, measuring merely 3 feet wide and 7 feet long, indifferent to external affairs. Xiaohua, too, remained completely isolated from the others. Were it not for Hu Jingqi occasionally calling out for him to attend to various tasks, one might easily forget that he was even present in the same carriage. On the first day, Sihua dared not utter a single word, but by the second day, noticing that others were oblivious, her courage began to swell. Occasionally, she would sneak a few words with Yang Dingyuan. Their compartment, positioned at the far corner, was filled with the thunderous roar of the train, intertwined with the boisterous shouts from the gambling games set by the Anhui locals. Moreover, several laborers occupying the nearby berths were fond of betting. Even if they lost all their money, the thrill of watching was enough to satiate their cravings. During the day, the compartment was deserted, and Yang Dingyuan, feeling rather stifled on the train, found some relief through casual conversations with Hu Jingqi. With Sihua accompanying him, the tedium was alleviated. When he inquired about Sihua's hometown, she mentioned that her father spoke of it when she was too young to remember, recalling only that he had mentioned a Dragon King temple in her village. Such temples, along with Earth God temples, were ubiquitous. Yang Dingyuan could only manage a wry smile. He had hoped to glean her origins from her accent. Yet Sihua had grown up in Russia, speaking Russian far more fluently than Chinese. Her Mandarin was halting, rendering any discernible accent undetectable. However, her proficiency in Russian was impressive, prompting Yang Dingyuan to request her to teach him a few phrases. The peculiar sounds of the Russian language, with its peculiar intonations, proved challenging for Sihua to teach. Although Yang Dingyuan was eager to learn, he could only manage a few rudimentary phrases, such as halasheo. He wished for Sihua to write them down. but she was illiterate in both Russian and Chinese, unable to transcribe even a single character. By the third day since leaving Chita, they were only a few days away from Irkutsk. The weather was splendidly clear that day, after lying in bed for 2 consecutive days. Yang Dingyuan felt restless and decided to venture forward. The gambling games orchestrated by the Anhui locals continued unabated, drawing a considerable crowd now, as they surrounded his berth, clamoring excitedly. However, by this time, it seemed that most of the participants had nearly exhausted their funds. The gamblers were few, while the spectators were many. Upon seeing Yang Dingyuan approach, one of the Anhui men suddenly exclaimed, "Brother Yang, care to try your luck?" Yang Dingyuan recognized that this Anhui man was part of Inshuanshan's group and wished to avoid any entanglement. He patted his pocket and replied, "I don't have a single coin to spare." The Anhui man seemed poised to say more, but a fellow nearby interjected urgently, "Brother Ma, hurry and reveal the treasure." He was clutching 2 coins, continuously rattling them, though Yang Dingyuan could not fathom why he was so eager to squander his money. Prompted by this urgency, the Anhui man refrained from pressing further, allowing Yang Dingyuan to slip past them. The military carriage lacked windows, with only the aisle offering glimpses outside. Upon entering the aisle, he found it already crowded with several individuals, presumably seeking fresh air. Yang Dingyuan selected a spot to sit and gazed out the window. In the distance, he beheld a dazzling expanse that seemed to shimmer, as if the white clouds had settled beneath the earth. Intrigued, he looked closer and realized it was an enormous lake. The surface had frozen over, reflecting the sunlight and transforming the lake into a vast mirror, capturing the blue sky and white clouds, creating an illusion as though the heavens had descended to the ground. The scene possessed a surreal beauty that left Yang Dingyuan almost breathless. The world is vast and full of wonders, truly beyond what one could ever dream of. Just as he was lost in thought, someone beside him sighed. "What a magnificent lake! Is this the North Sea?" Haisi is the term used in the northwest for a large lake. This vast expanse of water is likely Lake Baikal. Chita lies by the shores of Lake Baikal, and the train is currently passing through this area. As Yang Dingyuan gazed upon this picturesque scene, he pondered, no wonder the ancients proclaimed that reading 10,000 books is no match for traveling 10,000 miles. Initially, he embarked on this journey with an inescapable sorrow in his heart, yet he now felt that a life well lived should include venturing afar to witness the world. Although he had seen much by the sea in Shandong, the presence of such a grand lake in the remote inland was something he would never have encountered had he not set forth on this journey. Taking a deep breath and returning to his bunk, Yang Dingyuan felt considerably more at ease, his mind much calmer than when he first departed. Just as he lay down, he heard Siwa from the upper bunk softly inquire, "Brother Yang, where are we now?" "We've passed Beihai," he replied, considering that Siwa might not know what Beihai was, and added, "The Russians refer to it as Lake Baikal." "We are almost there." Siwa's voice, though soft, was tinged with unmistakable excitement, likely anticipating her long-awaited reunion with her grandfather. Hua Jingqi, who was nearby, interjected, "Beihai, isn't that where Shingongbao is said to be? The North Sea?" Yang Dingyuan couldn't help but smile faintly. Hua Jingqi's erudition was indeed on par with that of a diminutive scholar, both deriving their knowledge from theatrical scripts. "Indeed. Shingongbao was here," he affirmed. "I thought so. There is even a temple dedicated to Shingongbao, said to have been established by the Choctaw people. Every year, when the North Sea freezes over, they cast an effigy of Shingongbao into the lake. If the ice engulfs the wooden statue, people can walk upon the lake's surface. Come spring, once the statue reemerges, it signifies that the ice is melting, and one can no longer traverse upon it." Yang Dingyuan was momentarily taken aback. Having never heard of such a custom, he inquired, "Brother Hua, from which play does this tale originate?" "What play?" "Initially, I heard it from a Taoist named Zhang, who had visited this region. He claimed to have witnessed the effigy of Shingongbao, nailed to a wooden frame, completely bare. They perform this ritual annually. When the ice has melted entirely, the statue resurfaces and is returned to the temple." Yang Dingyuan was astonished to learn that a temple had been erected for Shingongbao in this locale. He then heard Sihua stifle a laugh, whispering, "Isn't that a statue of Jesus?" Yang Dingyuan suddenly grasped the situation and couldn't help but chuckle. He had indeed seen the statue of Jesus in a church, nailed to a wooden frame in the same manner. However, Hua Jingqi had likely never seen it, and the Taoist he encountered had mistakenly identified Jesus as Shingongbao. The tale had undoubtedly morphed through the retelling. 3 days later, the train finally arrived in Irkutsk. Irkutsk is a bustling city, where labor camp workers collectively disembarked to pursue their individual paths. Upon entering the Irkutsk station, chaos ensued within the train car, as everyone hurried to gather their belongings. Yang Dingyuan retrieved Siwa's large sack and tucked it beneath the bed, while he organized his own clothing. Hua Jingqi and young eunuch Hua had also packed their luggage. And upon seeing Yang Dingyuan approach, Wu Jingqi inquired, "Where are you headed, brother?" Uncertain of their fate, Yang Dingyuan remarked, lowering his voice, "Brother Hua, please take care when we disembark and ensure that Si Hua can get down safely. Rest assured, there is nothing to worry about. Just look at this chaos," Wu Jingqi replied, gesturing with his chin. Indeed, the carriage was in disarray, with each passenger busy organizing their belongings. They would be stopping in Irkutsk for several days. Some would work nearby, while others had to venture even further. Yang Dingyuan was unsure of his assignment and, seeing Si Hua descend from the upper bunk, offered her a hand. "When we get off, walk behind me and assess the situation before proceeding." Si Hua, now clad in the attire of a young eunuch, appeared far more presentable than when they boarded in Chida. She looked at Yang Dingyuan and softly said, "Thank you, Brother Yang. For that, you should express your gratitude to Brother Hua," he replied. Si Hua glanced at Wu Jingqi, who seemed momentarily embarrassed, perhaps recalling how he had earlier tricked her out of 2 sunflower cakes. He waved his hand dismissively, saying, "All right, just be cautious when we disembark." "Thank you, Brother Hua," Si Hua responded. Although she had not made significant progress in learning Russian from Yang Dingyuan, she had improved considerably in speaking Chinese with him, her fluency much enhanced. Wu Jingqi, upon hearing her words, felt a rare twinge of shyness, as it was likely that no one had ever expressed such heartfelt gratitude towards him before. He chuckled awkwardly, "Little monkey. Just keep your wits about you while you're here." He did not exchange further words with Si Hua, who continued to stay close to him, and even now, Wu Jingqi remained unaware that she was, in fact, a girl. Noticing that people were already disembarking, Yang Dingyuan decided it was the right moment to leave. "Let us go," he said, as they squeezed through the crowd towards the exit. The station was bustling with activity, teeming with people. Irkutsk, being part of Russian territory, surprisingly had a significant number of Chinese laborers, with many gathered at the station alone. As they stepped off the train, Yang Dingyuan was preparing to lead Si Hua away when a commanding voice called out, "Don't scatter. Assemble here." The voice was gruff. Turning to investigate, Yang Dingyuan saw a tall, burly Russian man with striking blonde hair and a beard that glimmered in the light, who spoke fluent Chinese. Taken aback, Yang Dingyuan listened as the Russian barked, "I'm talking to you. Labor camp workers, come over here." It seemed they were not free to leave just yet. Yang Dingyuan did not turn back, but quietly instructed Si Hua, "Let us go." However, a sense of unease crept into his heart. What if Si Hua was discovered? Si Hua, equally apprehensive, followed him closely, but soon realized the Russian had turned to address another group, loudly instructing, "Labor camp workers, gather over here first, don't stray." He was tall, with a prominent nose and deep-set eyes, his face adorned with a shock of yellow hair, and his Chinese speech was remarkably fluent, leaving the laborers in awe. The old Russian, however, appeared unfazed, shouting and gesturing as he surveyed the crowd. Among the several hundred laborers on this train, many had gathered around a large group, most burdened with various packages. As the old Russian noticed that the crowd had collected sufficiently, he boomed, "Is everyone here? You've just arrived in Irkutsk, and for the next couple of days, you must refrain from wandering about. Soon, someone will come to escort you to your worksite. For now, you may stroll about during the day, but return to the train at night for roll call." Upon hearing that they were to return to the train, someone in the crowd exclaimed, "Do we have to go?" The old Russian glared, retorting, "Russia is not like your China, it is vast. Since you've arrived, let me make this clear. First, no illegal activities are permitted. Second, do not seek out work on your own. For those yet to be assigned, you must return to the train daily for attendance. If anyone attempts to sneak away, they will face a year of hard labor. Understand?" His command of Chinese was impressive, yet his tone carried an implicit threat. The laborers fell silent, and seeing no one respond, the old Russian softened his voice slightly, saying, "Welcome to Russia, work diligently, and no one will be wronged. However, should anyone consider stepping out of line, do not blame us for being unkind. I am aware that there are those among you who are not trustworthy. That person should step forward." Upon hearing this, Yang Dingyuan felt a pang of anxiety. He had secretly brought someone from Chita. Surely, this could be deemed stepping out of line? He glanced back at Si Hua, who had turned pale, her large hat pulled low, obscuring her face. He then looked at Wu Jingqi, who stood nonchalantly, seemingly unaffected by the situation. The old Russian called out a couple more times, and when no one came forward, his expression darkened. He spoke briefly to 2 Russians nearby, clad in wide-brimmed hats and wielding truncheons, then pointed towards Yang Dingyuan. Having learned a bit of Russian from Si Hua, he understood that the old Russian was indicating him, causing his heart to sink further. He watched as the 2 officers approached and seized a man standing in front of him. The man, dressed in a bulky cotton coat and burdened with a large pack, turned pale and exclaimed, "Officer, what have I done?" The old Russian sneered, "What have you done? You were carrying contraband. The man protested. No, I assure you. It's nothing but bedding and clothes. As he spoke, he began to remove his pack to demonstrate, but the old Russian, not waiting for him to unpack, abruptly seized him and tore open his coat. To everyone's astonishment, 3 iron boxes were tightly bound around his waist with leather straps. No wonder his clothing appeared so bulky. The old Russian yanked the boxes from him, opened one, and discovered it contained bottles of liquor. He shouted, illegally trafficking alcohol. And you dare claim you've done nothing wrong? The man suddenly sank to his knees, pleading, spare me. I merely sought to earn a few coins. Yet the Russians paid him no heed, merely exchanging a few words with the 2 policemen, who then unleashed their truncheons upon him mercilessly. Initially, the man cried out in pain, but soon enough, blood began to flow, and his voice dwindled to a whisper. The 2 Russian policemen, however, continued their relentless assault as if intent on delivering a fatal beating. While they struck the man, the elderly Russian stood silently, holding an iron box. When the man's cries faded into silence, the policemen finally ceased their blows. The elder raised his hand, instructing the 2 officers to drag the man away, and proclaimed, public sale of alcohol is permitted. Private trafficking is a crime. You Chinese, heed my warning, any similar transgression will be met with no mercy. The platform was blanketed in a layer of white snow, speckled with drops of fresh blood. After delivering his tirade, the old Russian departed with the policeman. Yang Dingyuan felt cold sweat bead on his forehead and glanced back at Sihua, who trembled in her small frame. Fortunately, the old Russian had not noticed her, otherwise, she too might have been left bloodied. Yang Dingyuan was unaware that illicit alcohol trade was a grave offense. He silently thanked his fortune for leaving Harbin without a single penny or any liquor. Observing a new group of passengers disembarking, he whispered, let us leave quickly. These newcomers were not laborers, most were Russians, interspersed with a few Chinese coolies carrying burdens. Siwa looked at him and softly said, Brother Yang, I shall take my leave now. I wish you find your grandfather soon. With tears glistening in her eyes, she suddenly added, Brother Yang, when I grow up, will you marry me? Siwa's Mandarin was not particularly fluent, and for a moment, Yang Dingyuan did not comprehend her words. Upon realizing her meaning, he chuckled and replied, Little girl, what fanciful thoughts you entertain. We may never meet again. No, Sihua insisted, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. We will meet again. This contradictory statement implied that they would indeed reunite. Yang Dingyuan gently patted her head, saying, Who can predict the future? Stand tall, little one. Life stretches ahead of you. Seizing the moment when no one was watching, he urged, Hurry and thank Uncle Hua. He has aided you greatly. Sihua nodded and tugged at the sleeve of Hu Jingqi, saying, Uncle Hua, I am leaving. However, Hu Jingqi merely grunted in response, ignoring her. The Russians, prone to violence, made him feel a twinge of anxiety. In Beijing, he had lived as a person of privilege. Now, aboard the train, he realized he could no longer afford to maintain such airs, understanding that this meal was hard-earned. Sihua bid them farewell and swiftly merged into the throng of people. Her petite stature, burdened by a large sack, rendered her reminiscent of a youthful laborer rather than a true worker. Thus the Russian policeman on the platform paid her no heed. As he watched her silhouette vanish amidst the crowd, Yang Dingyuan felt an unexpected emptiness within him, as if he had lost something significant. What fate awaited this chance encounter with the young girl? He could neither anticipate nor dare to ponder, for even his own future appeared shrouded in uncertainty. The old Russian had mentioned that recruiters would arrive, and indeed, it was not long before a few Russians appeared. The Russians scrutinized the crowd, selecting those who seemed robust, marking their names in a ledger. As they pointed around, one of the Russians gestured towards Yang Dingyuan and Hu Jingqi, indicating them to the old Russian, who nodded in acknowledgement. He approached Hu Jingqi and Yang Dingyuan, inquiring about their names, ready to inscribe them. Noticing that the old Russian had not marked little Hu Jingqi felt a surge of urgency and stepped forward, saying, Sir. The old Russian looked up. What is it? Sir, I have a brother here. We should be selected together, he insisted, pulling little Hu closer. Though Hu Jingqi was not tall, he was sturdy, while little Hu appeared rather frail. The old Russian glanced at little Hu but remained silent. Yang Dingyuan then interjected, Sir, this brother, Herr Sheo, please take him along. Perhaps due to Yang Dingyuan's less than perfect pronunciation, the old Russian smiled, revealing a set of yellowed teeth. Fine, it's merely an extra mouth to feed. However, the place you are heading to is arduous. Can this lad endure it? Seeing the old Russian's tone soften, Hu Jingqi quickly replied, He can endure it. Do not be deceived by his size. He is quite capable and nimble. The old Russian said no more and opened the ledger, asking, What is his name? His name is Odyssey. The old Russian made a note and remarked, All right. But if you perish there, do not blame me for not looking after you. Although he was harsh with the man dealing in contraband liquor, he was surprisingly amicable at this moment, relieved by the old Russian's compliance. Ho Jingqi cast a sharp glance at little Ho, admonishing, "You little rascal, express your gratitude to the sir." Turning back to the old Russian, he asked, "Sir, where are we headed?" "To Belyazniki." The old Russian said nothing further and departed. Ho Jingqi, puzzled by the name, turned to Yang Dingyuan and inquired, "Brother, where are we going?" "Belyazniki. What sort of place is that?" Yang Dingyuan shook his head. "I do not know either." As they were speaking, the old Russian returned, stating, "Those remaining in Irkutsk are to gather at the recruitment office there. Others must return to the train by nightfall, departing in 3 days. Be prompt, remember. If you do not return tonight, there will be no bread to distribute, and if caught, you will face hard labor." Ho Jingqi managed a wry smile as he glanced at Yang Dingyuan. "Brother, it seems we must board the train after all. Engaging in labor feels akin to being a prisoner." "Belyazniki, what sort of place is it?" Yang Dingyuan was uncertain, realizing he would have to endure several more days on the train. It seemed that working in Russia was not much different from being imprisoned. He glanced around the platform, hoping to catch a glimpse of Sihua, but she was nowhere to be seen. Safe travels, he thought. Yet, he understood that such a wish might be difficult to fulfill. Upon returning to his designated sleeping area, Ho Jingqi remarked, "You little rascal, it seems you'll be facing some hardships. Out of kindness, I shall treat you to a fine meal. Brother, are you coming along?" Yang Dingyuan shook his head. "Never mind, I think I will rest for a while." Ho Jingqi looked at him, seemingly astonished that someone would decline an invitation to dine out, and after a moment, said, "Brother, life is just like this. Do not overthink it. That little rascal, if he is blessed, he will surely find fortune. Worrying about it is futile." Ho Jingqi, usually carefree, had perceptively noticed Yang Dingyuan's concern for Siwa. Yang Dingyuan responded, "Indeed, Brother Hua, thank you for your kind words." After a brief hesitation, Ho Jingqi pulled out $2 from his pocket, saying, "Brother, we still have several days before departing. Since you do not fancy going out with me, take these $2 and treat yourself to some leisure. While traveling, do not be too hard on yourself. However, do remember to repay me once you earn your wages." He tossed the $2 onto Yang Dingyuan's bed and strode off the train, accompanied by the young eunuch, Xiaohua. Yang Dingyuan picked up the coins, feeling an indescribable mix of emotions. Ho Jingqi was sometimes remarkably stingy and at other times unexpectedly generous. He treated Xiaohua with a certain roughness. Yet there was an underlying kindness that made the lad willing to follow his commands. As he pondered this, he heard someone say, "Oh, brother, it seems you've come into some money. Care to play a hand?" Looking up, he recognized the man from Anhui, surnamed Ma. He stood and said, "Brother Ma." The Anhui man waved his hand dismissively, "Call me Ma Tianhua," and refrained from using such formalities. "Yang, how about a game?" As he spoke, he tossed 3 dice in his hand, seemingly having noticed that there were few gamblers around lately, and now aimed to take advantage of Yang Dingyuan's newfound wealth. Yang Dingyuan shook his head. "I'm afraid not, Brother Ma. I am not inclined towards gambling." Ma Tianhua's lips curled slightly, and he muttered darkly, "I truly do not understand what Commanderine sees in you. Being literate is rather unimpressive." His tone was far from friendly. Sensing the tension, Yang Dingyuan replied quietly, "Brother Ma, who exactly are you?" Ma Tianhua cast a glance at him, perhaps realizing his indiscretion, and coldly remarked, "It is none of your concern. If I choose not to play, then so be it." He returned to his own seat, and as no one approached to gamble, he began to toss the dice by himself, yet his eyes occasionally darted towards Yang Dingyuan, betraying an unmistakable animosity. Yang Dingyuan felt a prickle of discomfort and could no longer remain seated. He decided to disembark the train. He thought to himself that since Ho Jingqi had borrowed 2 pieces of silver from him, which could only be spent in Chinese establishments, venturing to the Beryazniki might render them useless. Seizing the moment, he resolved to discuss with Ho Jingqi the prospect of enjoying a sumptuous meal, believing that even if he were to perish there, he would not have squandered the opportunity. Upon disembarking, the train station was nearly deserted. This train was scheduled to remain in Irkutsk for several days, leaving only those Chinese laborers who were destined for further travel to the west. As Yang Dingyuan treaded through the snow, he observed his surroundings. The Russian houses were predominantly sturdy, devoid of any embellishments. In the snowy expanse, 2 Russian children were frolicking, likely the offspring of station employees. Undeterred by the cold, they were scantily clad, hurling snowballs at one another while giggling, seemingly oblivious to the myriad of sorrows in the world. As Yang Dingyuan passed by, they did not spare him a glance. Unfamiliar with the area, Yang Dingyuan did not dare to wander far. Fortunately, the vicinity of the station was always bustling, with numerous shops lining the streets. Noticing a store displaying a sign for liquor, undoubtedly run by Chinese proprietors, he approached. Just as he reached the entrance, he spotted a diminutive figure accompanied by a group approaching from the side. Feeling a twinge of apprehension under Ma Tianhua's menacing gaze, Yang Dingyuan contemplated stepping aside. But the small man had already spotted him and called out from a distance, "Brother Yang," striding confidently towards him. Though short in stature, his strides were substantial, covering the ground quickly until he stood before Yang Dingyuan. Unable to feign ignorance, Yang Dingyuan greeted him. "Little one, are you here to drink?" The small man squinted at him and replied, "Indeed. Brother Yang, let us drink together." Faced with the invitation to drink, Yang Dingyuan hesitated, recalling how close he had come to perishing on their last outing. This time, he resolutely declined, stating, "No, I am merely wandering about, looking to purchase some food." The small man's eyes narrowed again, exuding a hawk-like sharpness reminiscent of Yin Chunshan. "Is that so?" Yang Dingyuan felt somewhat uneasy under his scrutiny. While he was merely making an excuse, the small man was acutely aware of this. With a forced chuckle, Yang Dingyuan added, "My capacity for liquor is quite limited. I truly cannot indulge." The small man paused for a moment, sighed deeply, and remarked, "I cannot fathom what the commander sees in you, claiming you are destined for greatness." Upon hearing the mention of the commander, Yang Dingyuan was momentarily taken aback. He whispered, "Little one, we are somewhat acquainted now. Tell me honestly, what is your affiliation?" "What affiliation?" The small man replied, "The railway, of course." The short man clearly intended to divert the conversation. Yang Dingyuan understood that if he were to clarify the matter further, these individuals would persistently linger like restless spirits, which he could hardly tolerate. He replied, "Shorty, let me speak frankly. In my lifetime, I shall never take to the mountains." The short man was momentarily taken aback, then suddenly burst into laughter. "Do you think we are bandits?" His words dripped with mockery, leaving Yang Dingyuan feeling somewhat embarrassed. Yet, having spoken, he could not retract his words and continued, "If not, then who are you? Why band together?" The short man glanced around cautiously, leaned in closer, and said, "Brother Yang, since you have spoken the truth, I shall also be candid. We are soldiers, proper soldiers, the Chinese Border Defense Forces." Yang Dingyuan had always believed they were a gang, so he was astonished to hear the short man claim to be regular troops. Noticing his surprise, the short man said quietly, "We are the Border Defense Forces who have received orders from Deputy Minister Su to secretly enter Siberia. Brother Yang, Commander Yin wishes to recruit you. That would be a tremendous fortune for you, so do not take it lightly." Yang Dingyuan furrowed his brows. "Deputy Minister Su?" I read occasionally and thought of Su Shichang as the foremost figure among those with the surname Su. He served as Minister of State last year, but resigned after a month and returned to seclusion. The only current prominent figure with that surname would be Su Shuzheng. He asked, "Is it the little fan?" Su Shuzheng, young and accomplished, had just been promoted to Deputy Minister of the Army at the age of 34, brimming with ambition. He was known for his cleverness, earning the nickname Little Fan. The short man grinned. "Of course, it is Fan. Could it be a fox?" Su Shichang, known for his shrewdness, was also nicknamed the Crystal Fox. Although such nicknames may not hold prestige, they are often used colloquially. Yang Dingyuan pondered deeply, unable to articulate his thoughts. Previously, when Yin Chunshan sought to recruit him, he was reluctant to get involved, wary of the nature of Yin Chunshan's group, fearing entrapment. However, now he discovered they were, in fact, regular soldiers, which could not be deemed improper. Yet he recalled his father's words about good iron not being forged into nails and good men avoiding the military, even if they were regular troops. It was best to maintain a respectful distance. He asked, "What brings you here?" The short man frowned slightly. "The commander has already informed you. This territory was once ours. The Russians seized it during our internal turmoil. Deputy Minister Su stated that with Russia currently unstable, this is a prime opportunity to reclaim it. We have come to recover lost lands." This statement was undoubtedly taught to him by Yin Chunshan, as the short man was illiterate and could not articulate such sentiments on his own. Yang Dingyuan's heart surged with tumultuous feelings, grappling with the gravity of the situation. The notion of waging war abroad and reclaiming lost territory was undeniably stirring, yet he found it somewhat hard to believe. Can this truly succeed? He inquired. Whether it succeeds or not, someone must attempt it. Without anyone daring to take action, success will forever remain a distant dream. The small man's face radiated an unusual brilliance. Perhaps the frequent discussions with Yin Chunshan about the aspiration to reclaim lost territories had inspired him. He murmured, "Brother Yang, what do you think? Commander Yin and I, along with several comrades, are currently working on the railway, awaiting the call to assemble. You should join us." Yang Dingyuan hesitated before responding. "Let me ponder it a bit longer." The small man's brow furrowed, and he said sternly, "You consider yourself a man, yet you hesitate like a timid child? This matter cannot simply be taken lightly." Yang Dingyuan steeled himself. "I appreciate your and Commander Yin's good intentions. In the future, I may indeed choose to ally with you, but for now, it is not feasible. What do you mean by not feasible? If you are unwilling, just say so. The small man, somewhat annoyed, spat on the ground and turned away, disregarding Yang Dingyuan. In his eyes, Yang Dingyuan was merely someone with limited literacy. Although Commander Yin's group lacked educated individuals, they could certainly manage without him. He wondered what qualities Yin valued in Yang Dingyuan. Their group headed to a small tavern for drinks, but Yang Dingyuan did not dare enter, instead turning away to ponder the situation. Throughout their journey to Chita, they traversed lands once belonging to China. Such a vast expanse of territory had been seized by the Russians for decades. Could it truly be reclaimed? And if so, would the Russians consent to relinquish it? He envisioned the clash of swords in the flash of blades. His experience of war was limited to the stage, where battles were mere dramatizations, with actors wielding weapons for display. Now, real warfare involved guns and artillery, with bullets that do not discriminate. Being from Shandong, he had heard tales from the elder generations about the war between China and Japan during the First Sino-Japanese War. Even then, China possessed firearms. Yet the conflict ended in utter defeat. The elders recounted how the Japanese slaughtered indiscriminately, leaving rivers of blood in their wake. He recalled the man at the station who had been caught smuggling alcohol. In this frigid expanse, blood would freeze almost instantaneously. Once war commenced, would not blood congeal the heavens and the earth into a single mass? Such images belonged to nightmares. He dared not dwell on them. No. A good man should not take up arms, he mused. As he strolled, he heard someone call, "Sir, would you like to purchase some food?" Freshly made pierogi, plump and fragrant. He looked up to see a small shop ahead, selling bread and pierogi. The proprietor, a man in his 60s with thinning hair tied into a small braid, was busily attending to customers. This scene was reminiscent of his earlier experiences in Manchuria. He felt the 2 silver coins in his pocket and approached, asking, "Do you accept silver coins?" "Yes, certainly." The old man, eager for business, gestured towards a display of thick sausages hanging in the shop. "Would you prefer fatty or lean? Would you like the garlic-flavored ones to be extra generous?" In the shop, the sausages were impressively large, glistening with oil despite the biting cold, freshly made not long ago. Yang Dingyuan took out a piece of cash and said, "Please cut me a worth of 1 yuan of lettuce." "Certainly, the flavor is robust," replied the elderly vendor, his Chinese not particularly fluent. Yet this phrase carried a distinct Shandong accent. Yang Dingyuan inquired, "Old man, are you originally from Shandong?" The elderly man, pausing his slicing of lettuce, looked up and replied, "Yes, I arrived in the 3rd year of Guangxu. I haven't returned in decades." "Are you also from Shandong?" "I am from Rongcheng." The old man halted his knife, his expression turning contemplative. "Rongcheng? Where is that?" "East Mountain." A look of confusion crossed the old man's face. "I hail from Xuanshan, not far from East Mountain." Without further ado, he added, "Let me cut you an extra 2 liang." Unexpectedly, encountering a fellow townsman in the distant Irkutsk warmed Yang Dingyuan's heart. This old man had arrived nearly 40 years ago, at an age similar to his own. He pondered what life had brought him over those 4 decades. The perplexity in Yang Dingyuan's heart began to dissipate as he asked, "Sir, have you always stayed in Russia? Haven't you thought of returning?" The old man shook his head and smiled. "I cannot return. My parents have long passed, and I have taken root here, never to go back." "Your parents are still alive, aren't they?" The inquiry about his parents stirred a subtle melancholy within Yang Dingyuan. His parents aged day by day, while he ventured further away. "Yes, they are." "Then you should return home while you still can. Lianyuan is nice, but it is not a place to linger." As the old man spoke, he handed over the neatly sliced lettuce. Just as Yang Dingyuan was about to take it, a child emerged from within, holding a notebook and speaking a string of Russian. The old man bent down and kindly exchanged a few words with the child, who, in frustration, threw the notebook to the ground and retreated inside. Noticing that the child bore a distinctly Russian appearance, Yang Dingyuan asked, "Sir, who is this child to you?" "My grandson," the old man replied with a bitter smile. Picking up the notebook, both generations had married Russian women, and now the 3rd generation was entirely Russian, unwilling even to learn Chinese. The old man wished to teach his grandson the Chinese language, but the child found it too difficult and refused to learn. Yang Dingyuan felt a twinge of sorrow. When he had set out for Russia, Chen Zhenzhong had jokingly remarked that if he married a Russian woman, their children would be yellow-haired. At the time, he thought it merely a jest, but here stood the old man, embodying Chen Zhenzhong's humorous words. As he prepared to leave, he noticed the notebook the child had discarded resting on the counter, with several characters written in a brush. He remarked, "Speaking Russian is fine. I wish to learn it. Yet I have never succeeded." The old man, hearing his desire to learn Russian, smiled wryly. "I fear that if you learn it well, you may forget your own language." The old man had likely forgotten a considerable amount of Chinese. As Yang Dingyuan contemplated this, he was about to leave when the old man suddenly called out to him, "Young man, if you wish to learn Russian, take this book and have a look. It's of no use to me anymore." Yang Dingyuan accepted the book, inquiring, "What is this?" The old man replied, "I wrote it for my grandson to learn Chinese. You can use it to study Russian. It might still serve some purpose." The old man smiled faintly, adding, "In any case, it's of no use to me." "Thank you, sir," Yang Dingyuan said, tucking the book into his coat and turning back towards the station. After walking a short distance, he glanced back and noticed another customer entering the shop, this time, a Russian. The old man spoke Russian with remarkable fluency. Yang Dingyuan dared not look any longer, pondering whether he too might someday become like that. Yet, he was reluctant to entertain such thoughts, even as they persisted in his mind, refusing to be dismissed. Upon returning to the train, he found that Hua Jingxi and the young eunuch had yet to return. A group of new arrivals had come to replace those who had departed, and diagonally across from him lay a man who had fallen asleep. Ma Tianhua had gathered several newly arrived laborers for a game of chance, thoroughly engrossed in their gambling, the faint scent of alcohol lingering in the air, suggesting he had likely indulged recently. Yang Dingyuan returned to his bunk, poured himself a cup of water, and broke off a piece of rye bread to enjoy with some lard. The dry bread was rather unpalatable, yet with the addition of food, it suddenly seemed delightful, especially since it had been a long time since Yang Dingyuan had tasted meat, making it an exquisite experience. As he was eating, a sudden commotion erupted outside. The man diagonally across from him suddenly sprang up, panic etched across his face, and dashed out of the carriage. Yang Dingyuan, unsure of what had transpired, felt it was none of his concern and chose to ignore it. However, Ma Tianhua stood up. One of his gambling companions asked, "Brother Ma, are we not continuing?" Ma Tianhua irritably replied, "Just a moment," as he approached the man's bunk and abruptly lifted the bedding. Beneath the bedding lay several iron boxes. The sight of these boxes startled Yang Dingyuan. Were they not used for smuggling liquor? It seemed the fleeing man had brought alcohol to sell, and the commotion outside was likely due to customs officers conducting a raid. Upon seeing the boxes, a look of delight spread across Ma Tianhua's face. He returned to his bunk, pulled out a bucket from beneath it, and tossed the iron boxes inside. The bucket still contained half a bucket of water, which he kicked under the bunk, whispering fiercely, "No one is to speak of this." His expression had turned menacing, leaving those engaged in gambling visibly startled, nodding numbly in response. Yet, Ma Tianhua appeared unfazed, plopping back down and declaring, "Come on, let us continue." They resumed their game for a short while when several Russian policemen, accompanied by a large dog, stormed into the carriage. At the sight of the officers, all activities came to an abrupt halt, and Yang Dingyuan ceased eating. The policemen scanned the area, uttering a few phrases in Russian as they let the dog sniff around. However, the iron boxes submerged in water had lost their scent of alcohol, and after a brief investigation, the dog darted towards the exit, with the policemen following suit. Yang Dingyuan realized that if the man was caught, he would undoubtedly face a severe beating. Feeling a wave of frustration, he lost his appetite and took out the book from his coat to read. On the notebook, numerous characters were inscribed with a brush. It was difficult to discern that the old man had a shop, yet his calligraphy was remarkably exquisite. The pages were filled with everyday dialogues, alternating between Russian and Chinese. However, the Chinese phrases were written in an overly ornate manner, with expressions like "and" peppered throughout. Beneath the phrase, it was annotated with. Yang Dingyuan nearly burst into laughter, pondering that such phrases were challenging even for him, let alone for the old man as grandson. If the boy had mastered them, he would likely speak as though reciting from a stage script. Nevertheless, Yang had intended to keep such a notebook. It proved to be quite beneficial since Sihua could not read. With this reference, he was able to decipher the few phrases of Russian Sihua had taught him, thus grasping their written form. While he was silently reciting the phrases, a sudden shout pierced the air. "Who took my iron box? Bring it forth." He looked up to see the man who had fled earlier, his face flushed and red, undoubtedly from his hasty retreat, appearing utterly exasperated. As he shouted, Ma Tianhua abruptly tossed the die from his hand, exclaiming, "Damn it, what are you screaming about? Your liquor has long been confiscated by the customs." The man turned towards Ma Tianhua, retorting, "Pa, you think you know it's liquor? I've been hiding outside and haven't seen them take it." He continued to bluster, but Ma Tianhua paid him no heed. Two spectators of the gambling game stood up, pushing and shoving, saying, "Brother, your words are quite misguided. If you want to know where it went, we'll tell you, but you won't believe it. You can't go around defaming others." These two robust individuals easily overpowered the man, sending him stumbling out of the carriage. Rising from the snow, he muttered angrily, "All right, just wait." The two men laughed. "We're waiting, not running." Once the man departed, they approached Ma Tianhua, chuckling, "Brother Ma, this fellow truly lacks insight. Today, we've struck gold." Ma Tianhua chuckled in return, cursing, "A fat pig at the gate. Fortune is surely on your side." Yet, it was not long before the man returned. This time not alone, but accompanied by 3 tall and burly companions. As the man boarded the carriage, he glared at Ma Tianhua, declaring, "Brother, you." His words abruptly halted as Ma Tianhua brandished a revolver, the ominous barrel pressed against his chest. Ma Tianhua's movements were swift. No one had perceived how he had drawn the weapon. Rising to his feet, he aimed the gun at the man, murmuring, "If you know what's good for you, scram, lest my bullet finds its mark." In that moment, even the 3 men he had brought were left dumbfounded. The 4 retreated step by step, and the man, stomping his foot, cursed, "Fine, let us go." As soon as they departed, Ma Tianhua smiled faintly, returning his firearm to his bosom. He retrieved a water bucket from beneath the bed and extracted several iron boxes, opening one with anticipation. Inside lay 2 bottles of liquor. He deftly pried one open with his teeth and exclaimed, "At last, Xiaojiu, now you can indulge in your grains." The 2 men who had assisted him earlier chuckled and seized the alcohol, taking hearty swigs. Yang Dingyuan recognized that Ma Tianhua and Yin Chunshan were comrades and undoubtedly soldiers themselves, and it was evident that the 2 aiding them were also military men. Observing the demeanor of these regular troops, he silently rejoiced at his decision to decline the little fellow's further recruitment. His father's words echoed in his mind. A true man does not serve in the army, and he found them to be profoundly accurate. As dusk approached, Hua Jingqi and the young eunuch returned. Both reeked of liquor, indicating they had indulged considerably. Upon entering the vehicle, Hua Jingqi hummed a tune and, upon noticing Yang Dingyuan, called out loudly, "Brother, you didn't go out?" He sniffed the air and continued, "What a strong scent of alcohol." Yang Dingyuan, relieved at his return, feared any remarks that might provoke Ma Tianhua. He had developed a certain trepidation towards Ma, perceiving him as a soldier with a rogue disposition, capable of anything. He replied, "Brother Hua, I stepped out to procure some lydios. Would you like a couple of pieces?" "Lydios? I've had some already. I'll take 2 more." Hua Jingqi picked up 2 pieces and popped them into his mouth. Yang Dingyuan then offered the young eunuch, who hesitated, glancing at Hua Jingqi. With a stern glare from Hua Jingqi, he urged, "Brother, please, do not be so courteous." At last, the young eunuch took a piece and placed it in his mouth. Hua Jingqi, chewing on the lydios, let out a satisfied belch and settled beside Yang Dingyuan, remarking, "Brother, I never imagined this place had such fine sorghum liquor. It is indeed rich, no less than Erguo too."